Call to order the City of West Jordan City Council meeting for, what is the date today? Let me say the date. January 8th. I want to make sure we get that right. We'd like to welcome all those who are attending today.
It's not on the screen.
I know, I just need to look forward. Kind of have a little bit of a different setup tonight. I am not the mayor. I'm Councilmember Lamb, and I will be chairing this meeting today. Our mayor, newly elected mayor, Mayor Dirk Burton, we welcome you and your staff to the city council meeting today, and we welcome the newly elected council members to our stand as well. We will begin our city council meeting today with our Pledge of Allegiance, and we've asked Steve Jones if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Steve. We'd like to begin our city council meeting by giving the citizens an opportunity to do citizens comment. Just a quick note, citizens are permitted to address the council concerning any matter over which the council has jurisdiction, including comments concerning an item on the agenda. The council will allow 3 minutes to do so during this period. At this time, I do not have anybody that has signed up to do citizen comments. So at this time, I will open up citizen comments to those on the floor. Anybody wishing to come forward and give a citizen comment, please come forward and state your name and your information, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay. If there's nobody, then we will close citizen comments and we will move to communications. Our communications tonight, we will start with mayor's report from Mayor Dirk Burton. Following Dirk Burton, we will have a CAO report, I believe, from Corbin. Is Corbin here?
Yes, he is here. He
Okay.
should be back in. I'll just keep talking until he comes back.
Okay, so we'll go from there. So we'll start with Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. No, I guess it's not anymore. Chair, temporary chair. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to this, actually a very historic meeting for West Jordan City. We have never had a meeting like this in this city, so this is a great opportunity for us. And I want to welcome our new council members here. So I'm excited to work with you, and this is going to be great. And a re-welcome to the existing council members and those who are re-elected. I've had experience working with you and look forward to continuing to work with you as we make these changes and make great things continue to happen here in West Jordan. I want to mention a couple of things about economic development that's been happening. Is we are aware there's been some things happening in Jordan Landing, and a couple of restaurants have opened up in there. One of them is Lucky's Iron House, I think they're calling that. That's a great restaurant. If you haven't had a chance to go there yet, take an opportunity to go there. That is now open. And there's Old Crab, who has opened in the last couple of weeks. So basically, all the businesses, all that center section, if it's not open yet, it has leases assigned to it. So there's good things happening in Jordan Landing. Also, the Chamber West has been making progress. They've got additional members joining up. One well-known company joined earlier is called Dannon.
Or is it
Actually,
Danone?
that's right, thank you, because they did make a name change.
Same thing.
And they've got some other good companies who have joined them recently as well. And earlier today, I went to a DARE graduation. When I was in school, they didn't have DARE. So I finally graduated. It took me a few years, but I've made it. And tomorrow I'll be attending West Jordan Chamber of Commerce Gala. And they've invited me to come and speak, so I can go and be speaking at their gala tomorrow. So our police department has done a great job. This is the first year we've gotten back into doing the DARE program. And we want to thank our police department for going up and teaching this in all of our elementary schools in the entire city. The fifth graders are the ones that are getting that, and they're doing very well, and I think it's good for our community and good for our youth. And we're going to have some discussions, I know, coming up on some committees. I'm looking forward to meeting with you when you make your committee assignments, and look forward to that. And as mentioned to Councilman Jacob earlier, that I have been serving on the Association of Municipal Councils, and he was my alternate. So I'm kind of deferring to him as the representative now until you choose as a council who you want to represent the city on that council. So other than that, I thank you for letting me serve with you and look forward to your meetings tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Corbin.
I have four things. I want to give you an update, and then after I brief you, we'll hear from Tawny, Chief Maxfield, and Brian Clegg in that order. Council, I just want to let you know where we stand in terms of hiring a new city recorder. As you know, our current city clerk is taking a job elsewhere at this time. We will be interviewing city recorder applicants on Friday. We had very good applicants. We're interviewing our top 6. Hopefully at this time next week I can give you a little more information as to where we stand, but we're moving forward on that process. If I may, I'd like to turn the time over to staff for a few reports now.
Whoever wants to go first.
Tawny, Chief Maxfield, and Brian.
We had an event on Monday. You guys might have heard of it. It was an induction ceremony and oath of office. I'm coming to you today to, first of all, thank my staff for the hard work they did on putting that together and making sure that we had safe seats for families and that we had some great refreshments for people to enjoy afterwards. And to each of you and the mayor and the judge for keeping us all short and concise so that we can move forward through that. And I just welcome any feedback you guys might have on the oath of office, the induction ceremony, anything you guys might want to see in the future, moving forward with events of that type, or any questions you guys might have.
Not right now.
Easiest time at the mic yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawny.
Council, thank you. I just had a couple of things I wanted to update council on. Months ago, you approved funding for the purchase of new SCBA's for the fire department, the self-contained breathing apparatus. I wanted to report back that we have received those. We purchased them. We've been doing some ongoing training with all of our people. As you know, it's a very important piece of safety equipment. We want to make sure that everybody's well trained with those, but our plan is to put those in service next week. So again, just want to publicly thank you. Second item, wanted to let the council know that we were approached as a fire department and invited to be a part of Utah Task Force 1, which is a federal asset. It's an urban search and rescue team with FEMA support. It's part of FEMA. Up until now, it has been mostly put together with members of the Unified Fire Authority and Salt Lake City Fire Department. And we feel very excited and honored to be invited to be a part of that. They've asked if we would provide 6 members to the team. And we've obviously got a lot more employees that are qualified to do that. And so we're going through a process right now to figure out who those 6 are gonna be. But just wanted to let you know, we feel like that was really a great thing, so.
Thank you, Chief. Brian.
Thank you, Council. Just a quick update on the CIP side of Public Works. Zone 3 North water tank is currently starting the construction. Estimated time frame for that to be done and completed is spring of 2021. So some good news, we're moving forward with getting another tank in the system, so.
Zach has a question for you.
Just real quick, can you tell me where that tank is? I think I know which one it is, but,
It's off of 78th up by the Copper Rim subdivision.
okay, up on the north end of the
Yeah,
Copper
north
Rim.
end, yep.
Yep, okay, thanks, that's what I thought it was.
That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move to city council comments. During our inauguration on Monday, our newly elected officials didn't get a chance to give a little talk and say thank you. So we're gonna give you guys that time tonight, but we'll start on the side over here with Councilmember Pack, and we'll start with you, and then we'll move down the line.
Great, thank you very much. I'm honored and grateful to be here. I'm thankful for those that have allowed this to happen, those that have voted for me, those I represent, and family, and all those that have preceded me and that I have been mentored from. And I know this is about the city. It's not about me. It's an extension of what I've done for the last 10 years on Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, and Design Review Committee, and other boards and commissions, but I know there's a lot of new ideas as well that I'm willing and happy to learn. And my number one priority is to do what's right. I don't need to be right, I just want to do right. And I never want to do anything for political expediency. I just want to do what's right for the citizenry, working well together with others. So just a brief overview. That my prime directive is what the prime directive of the general plan states, and that's to provide citizens the opportunity to live and enjoy an exceptional quality of life. And the citizen directives that I've found as I've been campaigning and meeting with people, what we found is to leave the city better than we found it, have a sense of community where our family feels safe and it looks and feels like home, where we develop and maintain infrastructure and have plentiful economic development and good jobs. So I look forward to working with everyone, sharing ideas from different perspectives and points of view to minimize our blind spots. I believe that in collaboration with each other, the city is richer because of our differing backgrounds to choose the wisest decisions possible. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pack. Councilmember Green. Oh, David, undo yours. There we go.
Can I push the Southwest button so we're ready to board? No.
That's Dirk's favorite button.
Oh. It's an exciting time to be here, I think. My son, who's on the Draper City Council, told me, well, you've been sworn in, now you get sworn at. So I'm looking forward to some of those discussions. First off, I'd like to thank my family. Without their support, I wouldn't have been here, so thank them. I'm going to make some, obviously we have a classroom of students from either West Jordan High or Copper Hills High, one of the two, I'm sure. You got forced to be here, but we're glad you're here. Take note, because one of you is going to be up here someday. Let me sum up what my goals are for my next. I guess I'm the short timer. I was only elected for 2 years, and then I get to run for election again. That'll be fun if I decide to run. But for the 2 years, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to say for this comment period. And I was driving down the street today, and one of my favorite songs came on the radio, and it hit me. I don't know why I'm so emotional, but excuse me. But let me read the paragraph to you that hit me the most this morning. And if any of you know some of the Million Dreams from The Greatest Showman, you'll recognize the words. However big, however small, let me be part of it all. Share your dreams with me. We may be right, we may be wrong, but I want to bring you along to the world I see, to the world we close our eyes to see. That's my goal, your dream. And my dream. And hopefully it'll work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Councilmember Whitelock.
So, Ms. Tawny, I didn't want to say anything before because that was part of my comments. So I want to thank your staff as well. I think it was a great ceremony. I think from what I saw, people were enjoying themselves. It seemed to be a great night with the proper decorum and respect for what was occurring. So thank you, and thank your staff for me. As far as the high school students, these are West Jordan Jaguars. and I could sing this song, but not very well, so we'll skip that part. I didn't go there, but 3 of my children graduated there, my last child last year. So what I want you to know is that we have a new form of government because less than 100 people chose that for us, because that vote was that close. So most of you are going to be 18 soon, within the next few years. Please remember how important your vote is. When people say your vote doesn't matter, they're wrong. It does. And let me tell you where your vote matters the most. It matters in local government, because what this body does affects you greatly. What your school board does right now affects you even more. So be involved. And Councilmember Green is correct. One of you might end up here one day, because guess what? I was the shy kid. I didn't even use the restroom in high school because I was afraid to go in there, because some girl had told me not to be in there the first time I went in. So I never used it again. I didn't really talk to anybody. So if you think you might not end up here, you could be wrong, because you could be. Because I would have never dreamed that, nor would have anybody that knew me. So be involved with your local government. It matters. Your state government matters. The federal government, please vote, but your vote doesn't matter as much on that level. And that, ironically, is the election that most people vote on. So be involved. Good for you for coming. You came to see a new form of government. Those that came in December and not at the 11th hour saw the other form. But enjoy learning what you can learn. It's a great time to be a Jaguar.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitelock. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, sir. I don't have a lot to add. I'm grateful to be here and to be able to do this for 4 more years. Appreciate the trust that the citizens have placed in me for a second time. And I want to welcome specifically Councilmember Pack, Councilmember Green, and Councilmember Worthen. It's a remarkable thing what we have in this country, how we have this peaceful transfer. It's really hard to say transfer of power when it's a city government, but you know, it still applies. It's a remarkable thing that we have where the people that are the governed get to choose who the governors are. And it's really a remarkable thing, and it's been a unique experiment that this country has led the way on for the last 200 plus years, and it's just really, it's special, and I appreciate that many of us really feel that, especially those that are here. So thank you for being here. And again, welcome all you new folks. Can't wait to get this show on the road and see what we can do together.
Thank you, Councilmember Jacob. Councilmember Worthen.
I'm very honored to be here. I have served West Jordan City for many years in many different capacities, from the West Jordan Chamber under Craig Deering, where I volunteered and then eventually worked, through the West Jordan Journal, which many of you you get at your homes, where I was able to serve our many businesses, and I enjoy serving. It's just something I like to do. When I first put my name in to run, I had multiple people say, "Is that a paid position?" I don't know. I had no idea, quite honestly. I just wanted to serve. It was probably one of the most scary things I've ever done. Standing up for yourself and rah-rahing for yourself and saying, look what I do is tough. But it's been a great experience. I've had many mentors in doing that. I am a West Jordan Jaguar graduate. We will leave the year out, but many years before you. And actually recently just found out we have another one in the audience of our staff that I went to school with that I didn't know, and I've known him for years. But I want to thank everyone that voted for me, even those that didn't but still got out to vote. Voting matters. We have our military, we have our politicians. These people in our military fight for us to have that right to vote. So it's extremely important who you vote for, regardless if you voted for me or not. I thank you for getting out and voting. I'm humbled, I'm honored, I'm excited to learn more about our government and to serve District 2 and the entire city. I do want to make sure I thank the staff. I've known many of you for a lot of years, and you run this city better than most could even imagine. You're here day in, day out, sometimes long hours. So I want to make sure that you know that I've got your back. I appreciate you, I support you, and I appreciate all the support that you give to our citizens every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Worthing. Councilmember McConaughey, you seem a little bit lonely over there without someone next to you.
It is a little odd. Tangi's a little bit further than I'd like. It's always difficult being the last one to go. Hard to make sure you're not saying anything redundant. But first of all, I do want to give a welcome to those from West Jordan. That's where I went to school, and it was about 15 years after graduation that I found myself up here on the dais. So pay attention, be involved. It's really a lot of fun. And if you swing by the office at West Jordan High School, say hi to my mom, Kathy McConaughey. I belong to her. I do want to say to everyone who voted, again, thank you very much for the continued support, continued trust to allow me to continue to serve as a representative. Flashing back even before West Jordan High School, when I was in Scouts, we'd go on these scout trips, and you kind of imagine if you were to go up with the Scouts up to the middle of nowhere, let's say we were to go up into the mountains and we had a little summer camp and we decided we really liked it. You know what, I think we want to stay. Maybe we don't want to go home come fall, come winter. We start making it into a little community, little village. We'd probably start making some improvements. We'd want to add sewer, we'd want to add sidewalks, maybe add some streets. And then our family would see, you know what, we're making a really nice place to live. Let's go up there and join. And our little scout, what started off as a little camp, starts to grow. That's really what I feel like our city government is. It's a small community that started by pioneers and then just continued to grow. And as the city developed needs for services, most of us as residents don't know what it takes to build a road or build a sewer or why we need stormwater. So we hire professionals to come in and help us out. All of us as residents chip in our money, and this board decides how that money gets spent. We have some incredibly talented staff that help guide us and direct us, but really as elected representatives, our job is to figure out how do the neighbors want their money spent. And to those who are new on the council, I would encourage you to get to know those staff as well as you can, as quick as you can. It's very easy to come away from an election feeling like you're on top of the world because it is quite a feat to win an election. But once you get started, there's definitely a learning curve. When I first started, I didn't realize how much there was that I didn't know. When you do a ride-along with our stormwater department and see the breadth of the infrastructure that's required to support our city, things that are underground that you don't realize are out there. When we hear about the water tanks being built, the need for the water to support our continued growth, to support the people that are here. Nobody thinks about sewer until it starts backing up, and then that is the biggest problem in the world. The importance of water. Those folks over in Public Works do so much of our budget is spent there. I would encourage everybody who's new to the council to spend some time learning what happens over there. And then we have our folks in public safety who are a little bit more visible to the public, but provide these essential services. Please try and take some time to learn what they do. It'll make your job representing the voters so much easier when you're able to get that insight from our professional staff who care so deeply about the city, have been here for many of them much longer than any of us on the dais will be. I want to express my appreciation to them for all that they do and for the open knowledge or the open sharing of their knowledge. And then I also want to share appreciation for Mayor Burton. This is definitely going to be an interesting transition as each of us meaning the council and the mayor are figuring out our roles and our responsibilities. And I just want to say thank you for the communication we've already had, the commitment to open communication going forward to make sure that as the two bodies, the mayor's office and the council, that we can do the best for the residents and help make West Jordan be the place that everyone wants to continue to call home. So again, I say thank you and appreciate the opportunity for the comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember McConaughey. I'd like to take a few moments to thank a few of you. First of all, we have a unique council here because our three newly elected officials, I don't feel like they're that new. I've known you guys since before I was on the council, and that's what's been great about having the three of you on our council, and it just shows the importance of getting involved. I'm a big believer of you don't just run to run, but you run because you know what's going on and you understand how the city works. And the three of you that are here on this dais tonight with us, I feel pretty confident that you guys have already got a good start. Probably a better start than what I had when I started. And I thank you for your service beforehand because now it's going to be a great for all of us here on this council. I also want to thank my fellow council members for this past year. When I ran for office, I never thought or imagined I'd be what they call mayor pro tem, nor do most people even know what a mayor pro tem is. But thank you for those who are still on the council and for those who are not on the dais for electing me and giving the opportunity to be mayor pro tem, and also for having the shortest probably council chair in the tenure in the city of West Jordan, because I will not be putting my name in tonight for council chair. So thank you for that. I also wanted to thank the citizens of West Jordan for all that they do for us as council members. It's tough. Sometimes we make decisions they don't like. Sometimes we do. There'll be people that will not like our decisions. There'll be people that'll be happy with our decisions. But I do know that when it's all said and done, the 7 of us, when we make a decision, we work together and we work hard to make the best decision for West Jordan. And I know that the next few years that we're on the council, that we'll be able to do that as well. So thank you to all of you on the dais tonight, and thank you to those citizens of West Jordan for your confidence in all of us. At this time, I'll move to consent items. I have not had anybody ask to pull any consent items, so at this time, are there any council members that would like to pull any?
Not pulled, but I'm ready to make a motion.
All right, Councilmember McConaughey.
Move to approve all consent.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey and a second by Councilmember Whitelock. Discussion of the motion? See no discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember McConaughey, are you still on? Okay, Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. I just want to recognize Alan is in the audience, and we will be accepting or confirming or appointing him to the Planning Commission. So I want to just thank him for being here tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitelock. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Dave Clemens for the work that he did on item B. He's been involved in a lot of, this is a long ongoing project that's been very, very difficult. That guy is fantastic. He has done so much good in his role. I just wanted to make sure he gets publicly noted for that. So thank you to David. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember McConaughey. Seeing as there's no more discussion, let's go ahead and vote.
Come on. Councilmember Peck. Yes. Councilmember Green.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes,
Sorry, that should be Pro Tem Lamb.
that's okay.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthen.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Thank you. We'll now move into business item 7A, discussion and possible action regarding the election of a council chair and council vice chair, consistent with City Code Section 1-6-9. Before we begin, I wanted to thank both Michael Oliver and Robert Allred for their help in setting up the computers tonight so that we can make that vote. And I also had a few council members who asked me about maybe discussing what a council chair does and what it is before we make a vote. And so what I'd like to do is, Chris, we'll start on your end this time. And if you don't want anything, or we can just move down the line, talk about what your thoughts are on council chair, and let's have a discussion real quick about what the council chair will do and how we will work with that council chair. Okay. Then I will open up the floor to any of the council members that want to go. Councilmember Worthen, do you have any questions or discussions about council chair? Nope. Okay. Councilmember Jacob.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say either. Obviously, the most visible role for the council chair will be sitting in the center seat here and conducting the meeting. That'll be the most visible role. But I think there's going to be a lot of behind the scenes as well, helping to set the agenda, working with the council director a little more intimately than maybe the rest of the council does. But I think probably the biggest responsibility there is going to be fostering communication between staff and the council, between the mayor's office and the council. I guess that's one and the same now. And between each other, the 7 of us, the council staff, as that fleshes out and grows, I think is going to be kind of the most important role that we will see as a body but probably won't be as visible to the public. So just a few random thoughts. I'm sure I've got more, but we'll come back.
Okay. Councilmember Whitelock?
Okay, I agree. I see the main role as running the meeting. But then on the agenda, I feel that that will be put together with, as we wrote in the code, it will be the chair, the co-chair, and the council director, hopefully in collaboration with the rest of the council and the mayor's office, getting input on, from staff. And my desire is that they be a facilitator of getting the work done expediently, and that they also help with scheduling so that we're always aware of what's coming up. I hope that person will be able to help facilitate communication, collaboration, and scheduling kind of organization.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Whitelock. Councilmember Green?
Councilmember Whitelock took all my words, because she used facilitate or facilitator 3 times, and that was the word I was gonna use. So since you said it all, and you did 3 times, I'm not gonna mention it anymore.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Councilmember Pack?
Thank you. I guess my main topic that I would like to address is just to ensure that we're all on the same page of understanding of what the council chair will be doing, what the role and responsibility is. And I'm wondering if that would warrant a discussion to make sure that we all have the same idea in mind. For instance, just by way of my background, having served, as I mentioned, on Planning Commission or Board of Adjustment or Design Review Committee and all these different committees, in general, when the chair was elected, that the chair stayed on if nothing was wrong, basically. But it's my understanding that this should most prudently be a one-year election, and there's really not a set way going forward of having that person continue. I think it would probably be more like the mayor pro tem, where it is just elected for 1 year and then rotate to give others the opportunity to serve, as the ordinance states. But I know that we're talking about, we're creating something new here. Also, the time commitment, because I know in roles where I've been able to chair committees, there hasn't been an egregious amount of additional time spent in that role. It's mainly been organizing the agenda and running the meeting. But I believe that others might have a different view on that there would be more of a major time commitment. So I was wondering if it would be a prudent discussion to discuss, should the council chair be attending other meetings, or are we having the council director fill that role to represent us? I know that there are some different ideas, and just before voting, I thought we could flesh that out, because that might make a difference in how we vote. I don't want any certain schedule of council members to preclude their being able to serve, but I don't see this being a full-time or a major part-time job over and above what we're currently doing as council members. But I'd love to hear other opinions and thoughts on what the time and responsibility and expectations would be, so that we're all on the same page.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Pack. Just to kind of follow up with the question you had, I'm not sure we're to that point on the dais tonight that we want to talk about time. I think it's something that we'll probably discuss as time goes on and in our council retreat in a few weeks. There will definitely be more time, I believe. And before I turn some time over to Councilmember Connie, I just want to put in my 2 cents as far as what the council chair, what my expectations are. Obviously, what the other council members have said, I do expect the council chair to run the meeting and to help set the agenda, but at the same time, I don't expect the council chair to run the council. I expect the council chair to act similar to the way Mayor Riding did when he was up on the dais, and that is to help us and to work with staff and to work with our city council director to make sure that our meeting is up to what we need it to be. I feel, and probably Councilmember Connie can probably agree with me on this, over the past few years, that we probably haven't had as great a communication as we would like as council members. And I think we have a chance to fix that this time, because we will be able to have someone full-time, a director, who will be helping us out. And then we'll also have a council chair who will be putting in a little bit more time than the rest of us as far as making sure that works out well. So I just want to make sure that anyone who's elected tonight to be council chair, I fully support that person, and I also fully expect them to support me in my role as a council member on the council as well. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Chair, for a couple minutes to pull thoughts together. I think most of it's already been said. The only thing that I'd really add is the expectation that the council chair, as well as the rest of the council, all need to have an open mind, because we're figuring this out together for the first time. We all need to be able to work together. We need to have open, honest conversation. The council chair, the prior form of government, the mayor was the one whose duty it was to represent the council when the council decided on something. In this new form of government, the chair is the one who acts when the council gives the chair direction. They are a reflection of the council, not the driver of the council. And frankly, we're going to be figuring it out as we go. Those of us on the that are on the dais have not been down this road before. This is new territory. We're going to hit some bumps. We need to have some flexibility, and we're going to be making decisions along the way, saying, yes, we like this, no, we don't like that. I think next year we'll have a much clearer picture of what will be expected of the council chair after experience, but right now, we need to have an abundance of communication, honest, open dialogue, and a willingness to just work together to do the best that we can for the city. I don't have a crystal ball. I haven't lived in other forms of government, so I'm just hoping that we'll all be supportive of that person, and that person will be supportive of all of us. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember McConaughey. Councilmember Whitelock.
How about we have perhaps our council interim person, advisor, read to us what code says what the chair does. Would that work?
Certainly, the prior council passed under ordinance 1610, the powers of the council. They are fairly broad. There are 6 specific. The council chair at the meeting shall be acting as the chair, signing all ordinances, resolutions, correspondence, or other documents on behalf of the council as a whole for the meeting. The council chair or council chair's designee shall also sign council requisitions, council payroll authorization, and other related items pertaining to council business. The council chair shall sign all other documents on behalf of the council as a whole, which are not otherwise specifically delegated to someone other than the council chair by the chapter or this law. The council chair shall receive all communications from city administration or other addressed to the council as a whole, and shall have the responsibility to see that all such communication is conveyed to the other members of the council. Section C, that was previously Section B. Section C states the council chair shall supervise the council office director except as set forth in subsection 1612A. Subsection D, subject to other provisions of this code and the council rules, the council chair may delegate responsibility to the council office director, the council vice chair, or other council members. I would also indicate you probably should also include and change that to include council committees. The council chair is a consultant with the council vice chair, setting all agenda for the conduct of meetings and of the council as a whole, subject to council rules. Section F, in the absence of the council chair or upon council chair's inability to function or in the council chair's direct request, the council vice chair shall be acting council chair and shall have and exercise all powers and authority of the council chair. And finally, Section G, in the event of the absence of the council chair, council vice chair, the council may appoint an acting council chair for a meeting. It's pretty broad, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we move forward? You guys are all ready. Okay, so to give the public kind of an idea of what we're doing here, so the council chair needs to receive a majority of votes, which is 4 votes in this council. We have set up computers so that we are able to all vote for those who would like to run for chair. When we do that vote, the first vote, if it ends in a 4-3 vote, the person with the 4 votes becomes the council chair. If there is a 3-2-2 vote or a 3-3-1 vote, then we would go to another round of voting. Before we do that, as council chair, I would like to ask those on the council who are interested, whether or not they would like to run for council chair. I do have 3 that have talked to me beforehand, and I'm going to assume at this time that Councilmember Conahey, Councilmember Jacob, and Councilmember Whitelock would like to put their names in. Are there any other council members on the dais that would like to also do that as well? Okay, seeing none. We will move forward with the vote. However, I do have one concern. We have these nice computers up here, but I can see everyone's computer, so it's not really.
If I can clarify, we've changed the way the voting will occur.
Okay.
Once you press the name of who you're voting and you hit the white box that comes up casting your ballot, it will disappear.
Okay.
So no one, once you make that vote, it will drop out of view. And just so the public is aware, you'll be voting only for the chair in this instance. Once this is concluded, then you'll do the same process to elect a vice chair.
Okay. So then the second question I have is, when you guys did this previously with the vote about 2.5 years ago, it was showing up on the screen. Is that something that we want to do, or is that possible? Or
Right now, it is designed that once the program starts to run, it'll be seen both
Okay.
on the screen above my shoulder here, as well as on the screen being broadcast on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay. So at this time, with my understanding, the other names that are on here should kind of not disappear, but they should not be on there. Is that correct, Michael? Hit reset? Okay. Oh, there you go. Yes. Abstain is not a guy.
I met Ab the other
Okay.
day.
So at this time, I guess focus on your computers and make your vote for who you would like on this first round. All right, so we have Chris McConaughey with 3 votes, Zach Jacob with 2, and Kayleen Whitelock with 2. So that would take us to a second round. However, for the second round, we would need to have a runoff between Zach Jacob and Kayleen Whitelock. Well, that's what I meant. So a runoff. So this is where the coin toss comes in. And we had talked about doing the coin toss last night. Is that coin toss set up?
That is, and I'm going to ask Duncan Murray from the city attorney's office. He has a coin that has white tape on one side. We're going to put the initials ZJ on one side and KW on the other. He'll flip it in the center of the well. He'll then call out which initials are face up. That person whose initials are face up will proceed to the final.
Okay, are you gonna have the just fall to the floor? Yes. Okay.
So I'll just confirm with Mr. Bricky that on one side of the coin, there are the initials CJ. On the other side, there are the initials KW.
That's what I saw.
So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to go ahead and flip the coin?
Yes, go ahead.
The coin is KW.
Okay.
At this point, the names that will appear on your computer next will be those 2 names for the final vote. Once you vote, again, the ballot will drop off and the results will show up here on the screen, again, over my shoulder and in front of you. Michael, will you let them know when they're ready to reset?
According to the votes, Councilmember McConaughey has won by a vote of 5-2 over Councilmember Whitelock. So we will move from there.
Vice Chair.
Oh, you're right, Vice Chair. Keep forgetting about that little one. Okay. So I will do that. Once again, I will ask those on the council. I have not asked about Vice Chair. So I will kind of go down the line and see those who want to put their name in for Vice Chair. So Councilmember Jacob? Councilmember Whitelock, would you like to do Vice Chair?
Nope.
Councilmember Green? Yes. Councilmember Pack? No. Okay. So we will have Councilmember Green and Councilmember Jacob as Vice Chair and make a vote. Just the two. Just the two.
Abstain, what happened to the speaker?
We're just waiting for a reset. Maybe. The double click vote chair? Okay. I think we're good. I think everyone's already got it up and they're voting.
Are we voting?
I already voted.
Vote early, vote often.
This mouse pad is not responding.
Tap the button.
Tap the button.
All of them.
So you cast vote. Okay, according to the vote, Vice Chair will be Kelvin Green with a vote of 4-3. So Councilmember McConaughey, or I guess newly voted in Council Chair, and Vice Chair Kelvin Green. So we talked about just me continuing with the meeting for the rest of the meeting today and moving from there. Do you have any comments, Councilmember McConaughey?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the vote of confidence from the council. I look forward to serving in this capacity. Second, as was noted, and just to make sure everything's on the up and up, code does allow for the chair to, or for the council chair to designate someone to act as a chair for a meeting. So I would like to have you continue as chair for the remainder of this meeting, if that's okay with the council. And then the other thought, this is a little bit out there, but I know we've got a number of folks here who are here from the high school that need to have some sort of evidence that they were here. In the past, in some of the other meetings, we've taken a short recess so that they could get a photo with the council. Would the council be open to taking a short recess before the next item so that those who are here, if they'd like, can have their picture taken as evidence that they were indeed here in attendance? Would the council be in favor of this? If so, I'd
Are you
make
making a motion to recess right now?
I'll defer to timing, your timing, but I would be open to that if that's something that the majority of the council would want to accommodate.
At this time, for me, as acting council chair, I would like to do item number B first, and then do that afterwards. Would that work for the council? Okay, great. Well, let's move to business item B, discussion and possible action regarding resolution 20-04, consenting to the appointment of Corbin Lee as the Chief Administrative Officer of the City of West Jordan and authorizing the mayor to execute an employment agreement. We'll turn the time over to Mayor Burton.
Thank you. So each of you have received in your packet the information about Corbin Lee. He is the person whom I have selected as the Chief Administrative Officer to serve with me here in the city. If you have any questions or discussions about what is in the contract or about Mr. Lee himself, I'd be happy to entertain those. Otherwise, I'm just happy to let you make the motion and make your decision.
Thank you, Mayor. Any discussion from the council? Councilmember Worthen.
I just want to say, Mayor, it was a great choice. I've seen Corbin's work under David. David did an amazing job for our city, and I think we're very lucky to have Corbin staying on with us.
Thank you, Councilmember Worthen. Councilmember Green.
I think that this, this vote will be a little bit different than what we do with advice and consent in the future. I think in the future, we'll probably have some sort of interview or presentation or those kind of things more akin to a confirmation hearing to at least, but we don't have any of those procedures in place. But even though we don't have those procedures in place, I agree with Councilmember Worthen that we couldn't have got a better choice.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Chair. Move to approve resolution 20-04.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey and a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion of the motion. I'll have a quick discussion. The one thing I did want to talk about, and usually this is something you don't want to talk about publicly, the salary and benefits. From my understanding, there's no change in salary benefits. Is that correct, Mayor Burton?
It depends on what you mean by no change.
Well, according to here, it says salary and benefits are already in the current FY 2019-2020 budget, so.
Right, so there's no change from what was budgeted. That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure on that. No other questions? If there's any other discussion, no discussion, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember Green.
Yes.
Councilmember Pack.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Okay, at this time, I motion that we take a 5-minute recess and.
Second.
Second?
And I would like to thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes. I'm sorry, we need to vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. They all need pictures?
So for those of
a gavel to get back on.
Where is Scott on this agenda?
It's business item D.
Was added after.
We reconvene the city council meeting, and we've been asked to make a quick change to items number C and D, moving D ahead of C. Is there any objection from the council? If there's no objection, then we will move to D first and follow that with C with the Open and Public Meetings Act training. So Scott Langford, if you'd like to come forward, we will do item number D.
This item is just to request that the council consider holding a special work session for next Wednesday to talk about a very large master plan community. It's about 636 acres, I believe, last I had looked. And the reason why I'm asking the council to consider this is that this is unique on a number of fronts. It's very large, number one, and because of the size, I would label it as a legacy project for the city, and therefore it should merit some additional discussion. The Planning Commission has already seen the concept, but before we continue to march forward with this particular developer, we as staff need to know that we're going the right direction. The more time we wait to present this, at least in concept, to the council, the chances of us not hitting the mark increases. Some unique aspects to this is the developer is looking at a brand new vehicle to finance this project, a PID, Public Improvement District. The legislature created this last year. It's untested. This would be the first that I'm aware of in the state of Utah to use this new financing tool. We can get into that if we decide to meet next week as to what that means. We've got a proposed planned community form-based zone, so a brand new zoning district that may apply to this particular development. There's significant off-site infrastructure that's needed to serve this property. And therefore, there's a lot of policy calls on how to finance this, these costly improvements, timing and so forth. If you look at this map, you can see everything north of the blue line. That's currently unincorporated Salt Lake County. So you throw in the potential annexation into the mix. That's another unique aspect to this development. And with that, with the topography and so forth out in that area, one other unique aspect of this development is coordination with the Kearns Improvement District. So all of those things are kind of floating around, and we would love the opportunity for the developer to come and explain more detail as to what their vision is and make sure that's in alignment with what the council wants to see. I've been told that the developer has about 25 minutes worth of information they would like to present, and then the rest is totally up to the council to discuss. And that's the purpose of the workshop, is to have a more open dialogue. Again, before we get too far down the road, is we'll have to work on development agreements, development plans. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Worthing.
Currently, you have us meeting at 5:30, or proposed to meet at 5:30. Is there a way to push that back to 6?
Certainly.
Okay.
If I could indicate, just the reason it was 5:30 is because that's been traditionally the time. If 6 o'clock is easier, we'd certainly like to set it at 6. I can represent to you that Mr. Sontag has shared with me some of the issues that he wants to go over with is the master development plan, water, sewer, service areas, city annexation, facilities improvement district, and then be able to send out his staff to get further clarifications and answers, because they're going to want to put this right back on the agenda for the 22nd. So there's a quick timeline, turnaround responsibility he and his staff's gonna have. And that's one of the reasons of the depth of what they want to go into on the 15th, they think will be better set in an actual work session. Now, previously, the council approved certain dates this year for public meetings. The reason we're gonna have to set tonight for a vote is because we're gonna need to re-advertise or notice that the 15th will likely have a quorum present. So we need to do that advertising quickly, and further purposes of the work sessions discussion tonight about setting other work sessions if possible, and so that Tangi can get the proper noticing done so that we don't have to do one of these type of meetings or a discussion every time we want to have a work session.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Chair. If there are no other questions or comments, I move that we schedule a workshop for the purposes discussed for January 15th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers.
May I just clarify, does your motion start at 6, and are you putting a time frame on the end of it to there's nothing wrong with telling a developer he has 2 hours. We're gonna do this from 6 to 8, or 6 to 7, or 6 to 9.
My motion did not specify that, but if needed, I'd welcome a friendly amendment if council feels necessary.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Well, do you have any idea how much time they need?
Like I indicated, based on what they presented at the planning commission, they have a slide deck that they'd like to go through that helps illustrate and it helps with the conversation. That takes about 20, 25 minutes, but the discussion with the planning commission did not delve into some of these larger issues, so.
Right. So I would do an amendment.
We have a second on the motion before can't amend a motion that hasn't been seconded. The motion has been
Yes, you can. You can have a friendly amendment before.
You're still Councilmember Whitelock.
Go ahead, Zach.
No, I was just wondering procedurally if we needed a second before we could amend something.
That's why I was trying to intervene. So yes, until that's seconded, it's going to die without a second.
So we're gonna die. That motion dies for lack of a second. I'll make a motion. I make a motion to have the workshop on January 15th, 2020 from 6 to 8 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion. Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Council Chair McConaughey. Discussion to the motion.
I would recommend saying no later than 8, so that if we end up wrapping up sooner, we don't have to stay until 8. The motion was from 6 to 8, so I
6
would
to
say
8.
no later than 8 would be my recommendation.
Councilmember Whitelock?
I feel it should be no later than 9, so I'll be voting against that motion because I feel like this is a major thing in our city, and I'd rather get the stuff worked out before they come, and then we have to say no, and then it becomes a problem.
So do I need to amend that to say no later than 8 to fix the second?
Chair, if I may.
Councilmember McConaughey.
The other thought is by leaving it open, I mean, by putting an end cap on it right now, yes, it says to the developer, this is what we're anticipating. But if we have a motion in a second that says it will end at this time, I would rather see us have some flexibility there. We can communicate to the developer that up to 30 minutes for you to share information and present what you have, and then the remainder of the time will be council asking questions. But I don't know that we necessarily want to put a cap on our time at the end when we don't know what's going to be there. So I'm kind of along the same thought as Councilmember Whitelock on this one, but I don't necessarily know that we need the end time.
All right, seeing as how my motion did not leave it open, I will pull my motion and I will allow the council members to make a new motion.
Okay. I move that we schedule a work session for January 15th to begin at 6 p.m. and ask that staff indicate to the developer that they have no more than 40 minutes to present to us, and the remainder of the time will be spent with council, allowing council to ask and receive information.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Whitelock and a second by Councilmember Kahane. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
No, you,
Oh, you jumped right in right when I said no.
I jumped in.
All right, I will allow Councilmember Green. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that as we do this presentation, let's do it in a setting where we can actually ask questions and do that stuff, and whether that's setting up tables out here or some other room, let's get it so that we can get down to work and not have this formality that's gonna drive us crazy. That's just a comment, not necessarily anything to do with the
Discussion, okay. All right, let's vote. Does it need to be a roll call? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. So good luck. We're all back here on January 15th. All right, we'll now move to business item C, Open and Public Meetings Act training for 2020. Rob Wall, you have till 8 p.m.
Tangi, could you hit that? No, that's okay. Council, I've asked Tangi to dim the lights here. I have a few slides I'm gonna show you, but I committed to a couple of you that this is not going to be the traditional go to sleep on PowerPoint, but there are some things I want to get up here on the screen. All of you have been in public meetings, so I know that there's a basic understanding or an understanding at various levels that you all have. I'm going to focus, the first part of this, the first 10 minutes is going to be a really quick general review. And then I want to focus on two issues that I think almost every one of you, well, maybe not the 3 new council members, but the 4 of you that have been here have asked me over the last 12 months. And are also, one of them is an issue that continues to regularly come up with local government entities ever since the Open Meetings Act, ever since electronics became part of our lives. So I want to just start by quoting you something I heard and I've tried to internalize, although I'm not doing a very good job of it. Heard said many years ago, and that was this. And this was stated before the politically correct days of being able to refer to one gender or another together as men. So I'm going to use it as I heard it, even although it applies to men and women. It goes like this: the difference between a moral man and a man of honor is that the latter will regret a disreputable act even if it works. Let me say that again. The difference between a moral man and a man of honor is that the latter will regret a disreputable act even if it works. The Open Meetings Act is a very interesting piece of legislation because it was written, the last major revision of it was written several decades ago, before PCs were even a common thing. And it has not been revised in its fundamental nature to accommodate that. So as a result, there are portions of it that don't really make a lot of sense to our technological world that we live in today. But the basic principles do. And I can tell you right up front, and I'll end with this also with another quote, that most of the answers, I shouldn't say all, most of the answers to any question that comes up with regard to open meetings, other than the real technical issues like publishing 24 hours in advance and those sorts of things, are really subject to the behavior and the sense of values that each elected official has. Because as you're going to see, as I go through some of these, and I'm going to present you some scenarios and let you kind of debate them back and forth, there aren't a lot of black and white answers when it comes to the Open Meetings Act, particularly as it relates to what is a meeting and particularly what is a meeting in the world of technology. Why are we doing this other than it's a good thing to know? The chair, Council Member McConaughey, Chair McConaughey now, is obligated under state law to once a year provide all of you training in the Open Meetings Act and must ensure that it's done to a specific standard that's set forth in the state code. And that standard is that it has to be web-based training unless there's an interactive component to it, which there is going to be tonight, or it's a full day session that's consecutive, or the training's provided within 50 miles of this building. Well, we're within 50 miles of this building because we're within it, and there's going to be a fair amount of interaction. So this isn't required to be web-based, although I intended to have for you a printout of all these slides, but the color printer on the second floor stopped working about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And so I will be sending these to you electronically and providing a copy to the recorder for the record. The first thing I wanted to point out to you is there is some very, very good training that is available to you, anyone. And I would strongly recommend, particularly this first one, the Office of the State Auditor has come up with 4 videos, actually 5, including open meetings. And I've put up here, I'm going to send this to you so you have the link. And if we had time tonight, I could actually open these up because I've got these linked to the slideshow. But they're very well done, and they're fairly short. I like to watch them once a year, just to make sure I'm in line with the office that oversees these things and turns to the Attorney General's office if they discover that someone or some entity is not doing things the way they think they should. So I'd encourage you to take a few minutes and watch each of these in your leisure time when you have it. The one thing to be aware of, you have to sign up as an attendee. So you have to put in your name and your email address, and then they print out a nice little certificate when you've completed each one. The second one, Utah Division of Archives and Records Service has some very good information on their website about grandma. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but I wanted you to be aware this is also a great place to look. Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel, one of the handouts I gave you is from them. Every year after the legislature, they print a 2-page document that is a very brief summary of changes in the Open Meetings Act that occurred in the past legislative session. And I've given you a copy of that. It's a great little reference sheet to just keep with your materials if you ever have basic questions. And then, of course, you're probably familiar, most of you, if not all of you, with the annual 1-hour presentation that Dave Church, who's the retiring general counsel for the League of Cities and Towns, gives every year in the spring and the fall. This is the most recent one he gave. It's a little over an hour long. There's a link on the League webpage, you can find it. There's also a very good presentation that Nick Jarvis put together, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the League, that's about 45 minutes long on transparency in general. Very interesting, and I'd encourage you sometime to watch that. Okay, interesting thing in Utah about the Open Meetings Act is that there's very little case law. In fact, you can count on 2 hands. In fact, I think you can count on 1 hand, but I'm going to say 2, just to give myself a buffer of the number of cases that there have been decided on the Open Meetings Act. I'm not quite sure why, other than perhaps local officials behave generally pretty well with the Open Meetings Act, at least to the extent that there hasn't been a desire to really make a lot of legal challenges. But the one case that has continued to be very relevant, it was decided in 2001, was a case that the Tribune brought against the Salt Lake County Commission, where the county commission was acting as the boundary commission on an annexation case. And in that capacity, they're acting as a judge. So they're not acting as a legislative body, and they closed their meeting to deliberate. The Tribune sued to get, for the meeting to be open. And the county commission won, because the Supreme Court said the county commission is a legislative body, except when they're acting as the boundary commission, and then they're a quasi-judicial body. That's really not relevant to you now, and particularly with the change of form of government, because you are now a purely legislative, unless the form of government here changes. The council will never act in a quasi-judicial or an administrative capacity. However, the reason I put this up here is this is still very relevant to the Open Meetings Act. And this is, we won't read through this now, the whole thing, but this is, this is a quote from the, sorry. Well, maybe, there we go. This is a quote from the case, and it's this middle part. They cited in 2001 what was then a provision that has only changed in about 3 words since 1998, and the intent is the same. The change that was made even more strongly states this. The court said it's the intent of the law that the actions of the state, its agencies, and political subdivisions be taken openly, and that their deliberations be conducted openly. That's the fundamental purpose behind the Open Public Meetings Act. Here's what the legislation says today. It's the intent of the legislature that the state, its agencies, and its political subdivisions, A, take their actions openly, and B, conduct their deliberations openly. This is the bottom line. The legislature declares that the subdivisions exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It's not your business, it's not the staff's business, it's the people's business. That's why this is such a significant issue in the statute, and there's so much made about this in the media. There's about 6 general, and you'll hear different attorneys break this down different ways. I like to break it down and say there's 6 basic parts of the Open Meetings Act you need to be aware of. There's the notice provisions, the agenda, what needs to be on the agenda, minutes and recording, electronic meetings, which is a fairly new provision in the state code, emergency meeting, and then the penalties. I'm not going to go through each one of those, so take a deep breath. I'm not going to bore you with that. Some of these sources I've given you really give some well-done overviews of these issues. I do just want to remind you, however, that one of the things that your staff will work on and spend a lot of time doing, and that the city recorder does, has to do with these first 3 issues with regard to notice provisions, agendas, and minutes and recordings. And then also remind you that the penalties under the Open Meetings Act are twofold. Number 1, if an entity violates the act, any action they've taken is voidable by a court. Number 2, if an individual intentionally violates the act, it's a Class B misdemeanor under Utah law. Now, the key to this whole thing, the second handout I give you, is a white piece of paper with definitions on it. This is really gets into the nuts and bolts, and I want to read through this just really quickly with you. 52.4201, this states the basic rule. A meeting is open to the public unless closed under 3 subsections, and those all deal with the exceptions for closed meetings. So meetings must be open to the public, except. Number 2, a meeting that is open to the public includes a workshop or an executive session, sometime they call it, of a public body in which a quorum is present. Now, in this form of government, what is a quorum? Okay, it's 4. And a quorum means 4, not a majority. It's a quorum. Wrong one, there we go. So let's look at some of these definitions. So what is a meeting? Meeting means the convening of a public body or a specified body, which you're not, with a quorum present. So there has to be a public body, which is you, that is convened, which includes a workshop or an executive session, whether in person or electronic, for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter that has to deal with your role as elected officials of this jurisdiction. It is a very, very broad statement. So what does it mean? Well, convening, what does that mean? What does typically convening mean in your minds? This isn't, I'm not going to trick any of you. Yeah, coming together. And fundamentally, that's what it means. There's an interesting glitch, though, I'll call it, in the state law. And if you look at it, it says convening means the calling together of a public body by a person authorized to do so for the express purpose of discussing or acting upon a subject over which that public body has jurisdiction or advisory power. Where you're clearly a public body, you clearly have advisory power, you have beyond advisory power. What does it mean, a person authorized to convene the meeting? Go ahead, council member. What'd you say?
I'm pretty sure it's any one of us can call a meeting.
You would think so, but it's not. And that's the problem. Technically, the only one that can convene a meeting in this form of government now is the chair and the vice chair under the current law. Now, let me just throw something out here. There's no case on this, but it's my personal opinion. If the chair and the vice chair are unwilling to call a meeting, does that mean the other 5 of you can't get together? There's not been a case on it. I think if 5 of you got together and voted to hold a meeting without the chair and vice chair, and there wasn't a good reason why the chair or vice chair wouldn't call the meeting, I think a court would be very hard pressed to void any action that you took, as long as you took it with a 4 votes approving any action. But you need to be aware that the law does not expressly state such. This is what it says. There's something I'm going to talk to you about at the end of this, but just kind of keep that in the back of your minds. The next definition that's important, public body, what does that mean? Well, it's administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body of the state or its political subdivision. So it's you, because you are a legislative body. It also includes executive bodies. What does that mean in this form of government? Well, the common practice and common thought amongst most lawyers who've looked at this is, when it says executive body, that doesn't mean the mayor has to notice meetings he's going to have with his cabinet, or if there's more than 4 department heads there. It has been applied to executive committees like the Planning Commission, like the Board of Adjustment, any of those formal statutory bodies that fall under the executive power of our form of government. But it's one of these bodies that is created by the Constitution, consists of 2 or more persons, expends, disperses, or is supported in whole and part by tax revenue, and is vested with the authority to make decisions regarding the public's business. Finally, what's a quorum? Simple majority of the membership of a body unless otherwise defined by applicable law. All right, there's some definitions. First exercise. Each of these circles represents a council member. Each of the lines in between represents a communication by either text or email. Is that a meeting under the definitions of the Open Meeting Act that we just read? Let's go back to those. Who said no? Why not? Councilmember Green, what do you think?
Could you hit your mic for the folks watching online?
You're not convening a meeting, that's just communication. At some point in time, that communication may turn into a meeting, but I think initial communications, it's not a meeting. Just because it's, well, and if you look at the chart, it's just one-to-one communication down the row. It's not the body communicating.
Would your view change if that line there was a line with an arrow, and that was an arrow, and it was the same message going from council member to council member, with the initial council member writing the text or the email, this council member reading it, adding another sentence, this one adding another, and so forth till it got to this one? Does that change the way you'd see it?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Come on, be brave. You all agree with Councilmember Green? Meeting? Is it is it a meeting that would need to be published and noticed as, under the Open Meetings Act? Councilmember McConaughey.
Actually, I beat him to the mic.
Oh, sorry. I don't have the little thing here.
They're not doing any action, right?
Just an email talking about how many, how we should organize this room.
Then no, it's not a meeting, it's fine.
And why would you say that, based on these definitions? Did you agree with the reasoning of Councilmember Green, what he said? Okay? Anyone?
I'm not so sure. Can we go back to it?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Sure. Absolutely. There you go.
So the thing that hits me is discussion and deliberation. And where the communication's only going one way, someone's saying, these are my thoughts, and they're building on somebody else's, it's not going back to where it originated from. So I think it's missing the two-way communication. If it had two-way communication, then it would seem like there would be discussion and deliberation. But that said, it's kind of a gray area maybe in my mind, and I'd probably shy away from it out of caution.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts different? See, Councilmember Park, please.
Thank you. Well, I see it both ways because the daisy chain of communication is there and everyone's privy to everything else that's been said by everyone else prior to that. But as Councilmember McConaughey mentioned, there isn't the sender-receiver cycle, give and take of a discussion. And I wonder if there's any provision for asynchronous communication, because this isn't convened at a set place, at a set time. This is happening asynchronously.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's any provision for that.
I'm going to answer a few questions, but not very many. That one I will answer. There is not. Except if you decide to hold an electronic meeting, there's a requirement that you have an anchor location. And there has to be at least one of you here. Now, there's also the requirement that when the notice of the meeting is published, you have to notice the location. And cities are required to determine a standard location for their public meetings. That obviously is not going to apply to any analysis of what about an electronic meeting where you're everywhere. And it's not an electronic meeting in the traditional sense with an anchor location. Other than that, there is not. Those are the only two things that would address your thought. Let me ask you a question, council member. Let's go back to this one. What if those arrows that were all pointed this way then had arrows this way so that these went back and forth?
I believe that would change, especially if you put those in a circle, because then the sender becomes the receiver, and you've got the communication, the encoding, the decoding going on, the back and forth building, as opposed to lineal communication.
What if, hold that thought, let me ask you one more question, all of you. What if this original message that went to the second council member was just to that council member, and what this council member added, they did not include this council member as a copy, so it just went to the next one. So at any one period of time, there's only two council members who know everything that is in the one communication. Does that change anyone's thinking about whether or not this is lawful, or even a meeting?
I don't think it's a meeting, but I think it's a very poor example of how to communicate as a council. And I really hope that this scenario really never happens.
Thank you.
Just throwing that out there.
Doug, hey, far be it from me to judge any comment. That is a great point. Let's look at another one. But, one thing I wanted to throw out to you. One of the attorneys in our office practiced law for 5 years. 5 years? 4 years? See, 4 or 5 years? 4 or 5 years in Minnesota. And they were actually legal counsel for the League of Cities and Towns of Minnesota, their law firm was. He told me the other day, they have a specific provision in their Open Meetings Act that addresses that. And I was going to pull the statute up because I wanted to see what they called it. He described it as a serial meeting. I kind of like the daisy chain word better, but whatever it was, this was prohibited if it was text or email. being considered a meeting that needed to be noticed and to the public and have an agenda published. But that's, and all of these, even the Freedom of Information Act under federal law, all of these open meetings acts in any of the states, they're very statute driven. It's all about rules. Okay, how about this one? Several of you have alluded to this already. Is that a meeting? Again, text and email. And let's say, just for discussion, it was initiated by this person here, just to start with.
I'll say no, and I'll also ask why a telephone call would not be included in the text or email. Why would text or email be okay or not okay, and a phone call would not be okay or not okay? I say it's not a meeting because nobody has more than one communication with any other one person, so I say
Okay.
no.
Hold that thought. Let me answer your telephone question. I can't. That is a very good question. And one thing that you'll notice, we're going to get to this in a few minutes, but since you brought it up now, council member, let me throw it out because I'll forget. Those of you that have watched on the Hill, there is an express provision in the code that precludes an elected body from texting one another while they are in session. Those are the words, in session. And you'll notice that the legislature, while they're on the floor, they'll text, but they're generally not texting each other because they're not supposed to. But what do? They talk on the phone all the time. And the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel has advised the legislature that talking on the telephone isn't the same as this.
Well, let's just say I have a great idea, and I want to know if it's worth bringing up in council meetings or not. And I have this great idea about building a city statue to mayor writing. And we're gonna put that in Veterans Memorial Park right in the middle. And I think it's a great idea, but I gotta know if my council members think it's worth bringing up. So I call Councilmember Worthen and get her thoughts on it. She says, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I say, great, thank you. And then I call Councilmember Green and his phone just rings, so I leave a voicemail. So now there's a fourth mode of communication, to get his thoughts, and he texts me back. And then I try to call Councilmember Pack, and he doesn't answer his phone, so I sent him an email. Said, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? And he calls me back. This water gets really muddy really fast, but in any case, we're not deliberating, we're not making a decision. I'm just trying to get some information from people and see what they're thinking. We do this all the time. If this is not allowed, is Chief still here? Bring out the handcuffs, let's go.
Let's go back to the definitions. The meeting means the convening of a public body. Convening means calling together of a public body by a person authorized to do so. Now let's go back to this. It could be argued that if this is yes, it could be argued. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. But the plain language of the statute would seem to say that would be an argument that could be made. How about this one? This one we already, Councilman Pack, you alluded to this, it's the same concept. Now how about this one? Is that a meeting? Okay. This is probably the one that if there's something that's clear, this is probably what we could argue is clear, and that is meeting requires, if you go back to the definitions again, meeting means a quorum has to be present, and this bottom definition means a simple majority. So if you don't have a quorum present, it doesn't even meet the definition of a meeting. So let's go back here.
So,
Please.
I've got a quick question. Can you jump back to
this one?
No, one back before, this one.
This one.
So in the example that Councilmember Jacob shared, I don't think that would be considered a meeting unless everybody was in there at the same time. If you had even here, the way I'm seeing these connections, you've got the council member in the middle, who, if they're reaching out to all of the others, I mean, they're kind of a hub, but if they're relaying stuff, if those arrows are like multi-directional, so you got the council member in the middle reaching out to the one up top, information comes down and then just passes to somebody else and then comes down. and it's kind of all filtering through, and they're all deliberating, and it's just through a weird channel, that I would see that as a problem. But if it's one council member reaching out to another one-on-one, one at a time, I would think that that wouldn't be a meeting because you wouldn't have the three. So I guess my question as we're looking at the diagrams is this like an individual communication, or is this like simultaneous communication? Because Councilmember Jacobs shared, yeah, one-on-one, not an issue, which seemed to be confirmed when we saw the three. Okay, there's three here. All the examples he had were just two at a time.
Right.
Then the big question comes in with electronic communication, because time no longer becomes an issue, because people can still catch up and weigh in at whatever time they happen to jump in. Whereas with a phone call, if you're not there, you've missed it. Therefore, it's not really a convening. But with electronic or something in text, time's no longer a factor. So it's more a location in the internet, or in the, yeah.
It is a unique aspect to electronic communications, this time aspect. Before computers, meeting was, unless you had a cup with a string on it or a radio, you had to be present. It was about face-to-face. We'll have one here. Whoops. So you've closed the circle. That really doesn't matter because, again, it's less than three. One other thing I wanted to point out, this one here is referred to in Minnesota, according to one of the lawyers in the office, as a spoken wheel. And he said there's some express case law that deals with this. Whether this middle person right here, in their interpretation, could be either a council member, or it could be your council advisor, Mr. Bricky. Or it could be any person that you're using as the gateway to have a discussion to try and avoid anybody accusing you of holding a meeting. But again, in Utah, it's not expressly dealt with very clearly. Now, I'm going to show you something here, and I don't want you to jump to any conclusions until I show you something else. So here are the four scenarios, and we could go on and on and on, making molecules. But here's a provision out of state code that is only 8 years old, almost 9. Electronic message transmissions. Nothing in this chapter shall be construed to restrict a member of a public body from transmitting an electronic message to other members of the public body at a time when the public body is not convened in an open meeting. So now if you take that on its face, and there's no case law on this, I will tell you that right up front, so I'm not going to surprise you with any written analysis by a judge anywhere. But if you take that on its face, what does that seem to say about any of this? As long as you're not sitting here in a council meeting. And I don't have a great answer. I'm asking, I'm just a wide open question.
Take it on its face and it says, none of the above applies to anything electronic. It's sort of the Wild West free-for-all, do what you want.
You would think that that's pretty plain language.
So my question, where does it cross the line? Because it clearly, it says that it doesn't restrict us from transmitting an electronic message, but is there a point in time where that transmitting the electronic message becomes the deliberation that the regular statute talks about, or does it not matter?
Great question. What do the rest of you think?
Well, if it's going to be quiet, I'll jump in. Going back to the intent of the Open Meetings Act, the intent is that everything be done open, public deliberations, decisions, actions. Those all happen in a public forum. So kind of the reverse. I don't mean to insinuate that this is what, I don't mean to infer that this is what you're insinuating. I always get those two mixed up. Rather than looking and saying, where's the line and how close to that can we get before we're in trouble, just because of some of the ambiguity here, I would rather just be as safe as possible. And if it looks like there might be some gray area, maybe we shouldn't venture there. Maybe we should save it for open meeting.
Anyone else?
So here's my question then. So what about if there is a vote that's going to be taken in a meeting, and a council member calls 3 other people to ensure they get the vote the way they want it. How is that? Where does that fall?
There's nothing that I have been able to find, or that I have read, that anyone else has told me they found in case law in Utah that distinguishes between this being a meeting or not being a meeting, or any of these being or not being a meeting because of the topic, unless it's clearly not something over which you have jurisdiction as a council. If it's a topic of local governance, that's not a distinguishing factor. So if it's not correct to call and talk about this setup, that's no less or no more correct than if you're talking about who's going to be the chair, or how many workshops you're going to have. You know, two topics that I know are heavy on your minds right now. It's not clear. Let me throw this out to you. This is the other phrase statement that I gave you that I wanted you to remember. The Open Meetings Act and grandma define minimal legal behavior of government officials, employees, and citizens. Minimal legal behavior may be irrelevant in the eyes of the media and the minds of the public. And I do have a couple of little suggestions that I want to give you, so I'm not just going to leave you hanging, having asked you a bunch of questions and thrown up laws that don't really answer anything. And I'll get to those in a minute. But this is really what the Supreme Court was getting to, I think, in 2001 also. They're going to construe the act very strictly, which means they're going to look at those words, and they're going to make sure that they get those words defined right. And they're also going to apply the law very broadly, which means they're going to take everything in they possibly can. But even doing so, there's not a lot a court can really chide you on, because the language, it just doesn't work very well. The real problem that local government entities run into is the media and the confidence the public has in you if you take these electronic communications to an extreme, to where what you're doing is essentially having a conversation, which is deliberating. That's when the public starts to question your integrity, and that's when the media jumps all over you. And I've given you just one article that I found in 2013. I just put city up here. It's on the web. You can find it on the name of the cities there. I didn't want to necessarily disparage any city, but this was the title in the Trib. Do the city emails violate Utah Open Meetings Law? And I've highlighted a number of provisions, or a number of sentences in that article that I found very interesting. And let me just read the first one there at the top. That's highlighted. Email exchanges reveal extensive discussion among city council members about cutting employee benefits before a change of heart at the last minute, the day of a January 24th council meeting. The audience at the meeting that night had been led to believe a benefit change was part of the plan as the agenda suggested, and the council put the blame for confusion on city employees. But as you read down through this, and I won't bore you with it now, you can read it at your leisure, what happened was 3 employees and ultimately the city manager engaged in some very extensive emails about doing this.
How many members are on that council?
5.
Thank you. So 3's a quorum.
It's a quorum, yeah. And of course, because it was electronic communication, it got out. That's how come so many members of the public and so many staff members showed up. And the 3 council members were caught in a bit of a deception, saying that it was the public's misunderstanding, when in reality it was because of these communications that went on. And then they changed what they were going to do in the council meeting when they saw everybody there. It goes on, there's a couple of things. It turned to the last page there. This is the part that is a little interesting too. Attorney Tim Smith, a member of the Utah Freedom of Information Hotline response group, said that while the 3 did not violate the letter of the Open Meetings Law, the meeting did violate the spirit of that law. And that's why I was getting to you a little bit earlier about the quote that I think is an interesting quote as applied to the Open Meetings Act, and that is, the difference between a moral man and a man of honor is that the latter will regret a disreputable act even if it works. Just because the law doesn't clear on what you can do, as an elected official, you need to be very, very careful about the media's perception, and even probably more important, the public's perception of how you're representing them and how open you're being. A couple of just thoughts from me on this. This city is in a tremendous mode of growth, and it's probably going to continue that way for another 15 to 20 years. 1,800 acres on the west side that are hugely important. I don't know if it's humanly possible for you to educate yourselves to the extent that you probably really should in just discussing that issue alone in these formal meetings. Over the years, I've had many, many council members ask me if it was inappropriate for them to respond to a telephone call from a land developer. And my response has always been, who's your constituency? They've said, is it inappropriate to respond to a group of citizens who are concerned about a land use decision and to come and talk to them in their home? Well, what are you elected to do as city council members? You're elected to communicate with your constituency and educate yourselves and make decisions that the rest of us just don't have time to gear up to make because we're so busy making a living. In the amount of the volume of work that you have before you, you're just not going to be able to communicate in a way that is going to allow you to make decisions that probably require the attention that you need to give them without doing some communicating outside of this formal meeting. I would say, and I'm using this as the example you should follow. But I would go so far as to say that 85%, 90% of the work, the communication that goes on in the legislature is one-on-one conversations by legislators with each other when they're not on the floor. Obviously with lobbyists, by groups of legislators together in less than a quorum. I can tell you, without disclosing anything that I shouldn't, that the E-Center in West Valley, Daybreak, both Hale Theaters, Lake Park subdivision, a 1,200-acre business park in West Valley, the Riverfront Parkway in South Jordan, the Real Stadium, the Eccles Theater in downtown Salt Lake, the International Center back in the 80s that was developed by Salt Lake City. None of those developments came about without a huge amount of discussion going on by the elected officials of those cities behind the scenes. Now, how you go about doing that and what you do with the information once you get it, that's really, in my mind, the answer and the key to what you need to be careful with. It is completely appropriate, in my opinion, for you to talk to a group of neighbors in their home about a land development. But the thing you need to make sure you do is when you come back to this body is disclose to them that you met with a group of neighbors and here's what you learned. That's really what open and transparent means. Being open about what you know and where you heard it. So much is made about, let me give you another example. So much is made about, and this doesn't apply to you, but the principle does. Legislators going golfing with a constituent, or legislators going to a jazz game. You know what the real problem at the legislature is without the transparency? It's when key legislators hold fundraising meetings and lobbyists show up at these fundraising meetings that they're invited to with literally pockets full of envelopes with money. And they hand it out to legislators as campaign contributions, which is completely lawful and it is not unethical. That's where the real influence occurs on the Hill. And I don't mean to cast aspersions, I'm not doing that, but I'm telling you that it's not the lunch, it's not the two lobbyists, it's not the two legislators. On your level, it's not two or three of you getting together and having a conversation. That is not a problem, in my opinion, having watched this for many, many years. The problem comes in when you don't share that information or when you do start deliberating outside this room. And it can happen very easily electronically. Going back to the definitions, as you can see, it's really easy to justify it under the law. But the media and elected, voters view it very differently than what the law would arguably allow. And I say arguably because, once again, even though we can make the argument that convening means you can talk about whatever you want, whenever you want, as many of you are there, as long as Councilmember McConaughey and Councilmember Green, who are authorized to call meetings under your rules, don't call the meeting. Well, that's nonsense to distinguish based on that. But you can make the argument. No court's ever ruled on it. I guess the final, let me just run one quick thing past you again. Well, not again. This is a provision from your rules, and it's one that I would encourage you to take a look at in your strategic planning meeting as you rewrite them. It says texting or other non-public communications with staff or council. It's improper for a person attending a public meeting to use personal electronic means to send or receive communications to or from council members or to or from staff during that meeting. This is not state law. This is unique to this city. I'm sure there was a reason this was written into a rule. I don't really care why. I'm just telling you it's there, and I'm not criticizing the rule. But if you think about this, this makes it improper for your advisor to text one of you during the meeting about a question you might have. It could be any number of things. He can't vote. He shouldn't be able to really influence you on your decision other than giving you advice, but you're the ones that have to make the final decision. Why shouldn't he be able to do that? Let me give you one that's even harder. You now have a mayor who, with the exception of the city attorney's office, has every employee of this city beholden to him alone in terms of who they are accountable to. What if we're sitting here in a meeting and a department head is up here giving a presentation, and the city administrator or the mayor, it occurs to them they are not telling you everything they need to, or there's a staff member in the audience, they want to get up and say something. I don't know if you've seen, I get up quite often and I'll walk around. That's why. Because there's a restriction on texting for simple things like, be sure and tell the council about this other thing. And it isn't that they're not trying to hide, they're trying to hide it, it's that they forgot. Or something else occurs that maybe at the time that the CAO signed the staff report saying this is ready to go to council, he didn't think about. Now all of a sudden the department's up here presenting, there may be something really important that he needs you to hear. And again, I suppose he could get up and walk to the dais or walk there, but I can tell you this is a very unique provision.
I'll go ahead and criticize it because under this provision, it's okay for me to lean over and talk to Chad and say, and it's okay for me to lean over and talk to Melissa, but I can't lean as easily over to the end of the dais and go, hey, David, I think they really ought to come over. But I can text him really easy, and he can see that or choose not to look at it or whatever, just like these two could choose not to listen to me. It's okay for me to whisper, but if I want to whisper electronically, oh, well, no, I can't do that. I got to stand up, go walk down to the other end of the dais and whisper.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that at all, Councilmember Jacob.
So I'll go ahead and criticize it. You don't need to.
The response that you'll hear, which I don't buy, is that if I see you get up and walk over there, I can see, oh, he's not playing fair. He should sit there and say something. But if you're texting, I can't tell. To me, it's kind of a distinction without a difference. What does it mean to attend a public meeting? And what does it mean, a communication to or from staff? What if and I have done this, I will confess, a couple of times, where I have had one of my attorneys watching this meeting at home on something that they did a lot of research on, and they're watching the stream, not because I told them to, they just do it, and they text me. Are they attending this meeting? And let me ask you this, if a council member participating in an electronic meeting from a remote location is attending the meeting because they're watching the Facebook page, why isn't a person listening or watching online who sends a message to one of you or one of my staff attorneys who texts me not attending the meeting just like the council member's not? What's the difference? In the mind of the public and in the mind of the media. Not the law, because the law does not cover this. Now your rule does, That's why I'm bringing this up. Council member, you had a comment.
I did. We
Please.
had conversation about this one last, I think, when Mayor Johnson was in the middle seat. And the concern that was articulated was that when we're here in an open public meeting, citizens have an opportunity to come up and use the microphone to make comment, and it can be heard by all the members of the council. But then after that public comment is closed, if they're continuing to receive input or insight or additional information, that information needs to be shared with the rest of the council. So I remember one occasion in particular where she received a text message from somebody there, and she felt obligated to disclose to the council, hey, this is what I heard, this is what they sent me, everybody should hear this. And that seems to be one of the problems that this is trying to address. I don't think it does that. I see your concern, but that was, at the time this was discussed, that was the issue where, that was framed as in the context of this particular point. So just some perspective.
And that gets back to the comment I made earlier about when residents call you or a group of residents call you and they want you to come and meet with them. That's what you're elected to do. The problem is when you get information that other council members don't have and that's not disclosed. And the public, the idea of being here where people listen to you deliberate, they understand what your thinking is and why you're voting the way you are. And that's the check and balance. Council member, please.
I think I have an idea why that would have been put in. From my perspective, particularly now with the technology that we're streaming on Facebook and those kind of things, if we hold a public meeting and we're taking public input during a public hearing like we're supposed to under state statute, and then all of a sudden we're getting, the public hearing was closed, but now we're getting texts from the public that say, hey, you need to, that's hard to include in the public hearing record, and it does create a problem with the public hearing and public hearing record and what ought to consider. So I know where, I think I have an idea where that came from, but it does cause, one way or another, it does cause problems with, okay, we're in a business item, we don't get any, we're not supposed to have public comments, but all of a sudden public texts you in a meeting that's not a public hearing and provides input.
Right.
It causes problems, and it's probably something we ought to talk about.
Thank you.
Except
Council member.
this doesn't say anything about the public. This is just staff and council members.
But it said, it's a person attending a public meeting. What does that mean? And maybe what you do is work with some of these words and define them. And please understand, I'm not encouraging you to not discuss everything openly in this meeting. That's not my intent at all. And in fact, the way I view this is if I do receive a message, for example, from one of the staff attorneys, and it's germane to what you're talking about, I should tell you, whether there's a rule or not. If I'm using it as part of my legal advice, you should know this is my advice. And that's the same thing I've told council members over the years. Talk to the developers one-on-one if they want to talk to you. If you don't want to, don't. Go to a cottage meeting at a house if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes when you're not disclosing what you're doing. Let's see, I think that's it. Yep, I'm done. Unless you have other questions you want to talk about. Thanks for your participation. Great questions. I can tell you that we kicked this around about a week ago with four of the staff attorneys. And how do I say this without making us sound like that we're all incompetent? I'm not sure that on any one of those molecules there was even a majority, let alone a consensus on what the rule was amongst the 5 lawyers. But the safe haven is, keep in mind that it's the public's business. I, as a member of the public, I'm a member of the public. If my city, if my state, my county
We're contemplating spending $1 billion building a new prison. I sure hope that my elected officials are doing some pretty serious homework outside the Capitol building, because they're not gonna figure it out sitting in the Capitol building. So don't, on the one extreme, don't get caught in the ideology that you can't educate yourselves outside this room. And of course, on the other extreme, don't get caught in the ideology that says, well, the Open Meetings Act says that since Councilmember McConaughey, who was our elected chair, called us all over to IHOP for breakfast, that's not a meeting and we can do whatever we want. Those are extremes. That's not the intent of the law. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Before we move into our workshop, we do have a section here for remarks. Are there any council members at this time that would like to make some remarks? Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you. I just had a slight concern that it took us 3 motions, a couple of withdrawals, and a couple of hiccups to vote on whether to have a workshop.
We should have a workshop.
I'm just slightly concerned. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Let's do better. Thanks, guys.
All right, so at this time, we will move into our closed session. I'm sorry, our workshop. Workshop 9A, Stormwater Fee Structure. We have Denise Steck, and at this time, Tangi, do we want to open up the mics?
Yeah, thanks so much. I always feel short at this podium. I know, huh? Then it would be a real podium and not a lectern.
Is that the difference?
As if it moves or not, up and down.
Do you guys want the lights off?
No, we got
Okay.
You have a printed copy. Okay, so we gave this, excuse me, my voice is really raspy today. We gave this presentation, or a part of this presentation, in November to the previous council. So we're going to refresh those that are new a little bit with this presentation. So first of all, let's go through, the purpose of this presentation is the city's in need of changing the method by which it computes the calculations for stormwater utility for commercial properties. This will not impact residential properties at all, and we'll go over why in just a minute. And we'll go over those kinds of impacts as well. So Councilman McConaughey, thank you for your comments last presentation. We have included them in this presentation as well. So to define what some of these terms are, impervious surface is whenever they've developed land restricting stormwater infiltration. So they may have graded the land and compacted the soil strongly. They may have put gravel on it, asphalt, those kinds of things, parking lots, any of that would be called what is called impervious surface. So anything that the stormwater just doesn't automatically filter into. The second term that we're going to be talking about in this presentation is called equivalent residential units, or ERUs. And that's the calculation of that impact of that infiltration based on an average single-family residence. So every home in the city, if it's considered single-family residential, is charged $5.58. It's considered single-family. It doesn't go up and down depending on how much acreage they are or anything like that. However, when they become a commercial entity or a multifamily entity, they fall into this other category where they're calculated based on an ERU based on what we use for the single-family residential unit. And our stormwater utility is what manages the impacts and the conveyance of that stormwater. So it's the system that's the storm drains that the little ducklings fall into all the time. All right, so the proposed change that we're going to make, the fee calculation should be based on the actual impact versus the land that is owned. This proposed change will provide relief to low-impact properties such as parks, schools, golf courses, retention basins, etc. So at this point, our intention was to remain revenue neutral, and the reason for that is we just set the stormwater fee based on the revenue needs of that utility, so we really didn't want to play with that fee at all so that we're not messing with all the residences.
But we also found that we are having some protests to our fee based on the calculation method, and there's some legal involvement there. Our current method is that an ERU, which we just talked about, is 4,000 square feet. So they take the surface of any parcel and they divide it by 4,000 square feet. That's the first step. Then they apply 75% to that. So they take 75% of whatever that square foot or those ERUs are, and then they overlay a limit. So they say, we're not going to charge you more than 215 ERUs or 20 acre units. So there are 13 properties right now under our current method that hit that limit. So their fees are about $1,215 a month, and they're large pieces of property. Now, that method is really based on an estimate. It's not looking at what's really developed. It's looking at the whole parcel and then applying that 4,000 square feet and at 75%. So you may have a parcel that's only partially developed, or let's use the golf course. It hasn't been impacted by any kind of change to the land, and yet we are still charging ERUs for that land. What we're proposing is to change the ERU from 4,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet, which is exactly what 75% of 4,000 is. Applying what the impact that is on that parcel, what's actually impervious, and then moving the limit from 20 acres to 30 acres, or 435. There'll be only 5 of the 13 that were previously capped. There'll only be 5 that are capped now, and we'll go over who they are in just a moment. All right, a comparison of our rates and our ERU area, about 3,000 and 4,000, to other cities. You can see that Draper charges the most per ERU at $9, so they charge the residents $9 each. We charge $5.58 right now. They go on 3,000 square feet. Midvale, $8, 3,000. So you can kind of see where everybody lands. And then our current one is towards the bottom there at $5.58 and 4,000, and what we're proposing is $5.58 and 3,000. 3,000 really puts us right where most people are calculating the ERUs, but our fee is still very low compared to everyone else. Murray's in the process of doing a 5-year rate increase to bring their ERU rate up to $8.65 by 2024. They're increasing it by 65 cents a year. So the computation method that everyone is using versus what we're using the estimated version. They're using actual impervious surface. That's everybody, and there we are over there by ourselves. So this is, Councilman McConaughey, this was in response to some of your comments on what's the percentage change, because that can matter and that will be an impact. So I wanted you to know overall what changed. So on the left-hand side here, those accounts that will have a higher fee, there are 15 accounts that are going to have a 30 to 33% rate increase. That's the highest of the rate increases that were not errors. Okay, so that's just the calculation method change. 20 to 29%, 101 accounts, 10 to 19%, 148 accounts, and less than 10%, 103 accounts. During this process, after the last time we did the workshop, I reworked it. This original work was done by Public Works and given to me. I reworked it and re-updated all the information out of our utility billing system, and I found that there were 90 accounts that had billing changes that needed to be done. They were put into the system incorrectly in the first place. Now, whether they came from Public Works and GIS that way to utility billing, or whether they were fat-fingered, I'm not sure. But typically, we will be doing audits on our utilities on a biannual basis just to make sure this same thing doesn't happen. These billing correction increases are quite substantial. They equal about $200,000 a year. Those that are meeting the ERU limit increase, or have met the limit increase but now are going to have an increase based on that change of the limit, are 13 accounts. So 470 accounts are going to have a higher fee, whether they're a correction or whether they're a basis of this methodology change. Those that see a lower fee, less than 10%, 103, 10 to 20, 75 accounts, 20 to 30, 55 accounts, and more than 30%, there'll be 144 accounts that will receive those discounts.
So there were no billing correction decreases?
That was a hard one to understand. There are, I think, but I'm not sure. Because there were some changes there that were decreases that it made me wonder if they had already have an application for credit for remediation on record. And I don't know those yet. So I need to work with GIS to find out what discounts have already been applied. But of the ones that I looked at, I could find 5 that I think were actually decreases. But I'm not sure if the discount or credit has been provided to them. Any questions about the information so far? Okay. Those with the lowest impact properties, you'll see here, the lowest impact or the savings, and I actually put the percentage of change there as well next to them. So you'll see how much they'll be saving a month and what that net change is. All of these are areas that were calculated based on their estimates, but their actual impervious surface is far less. You can see a couple of schools on there, of course, because they have a lot of fields and those kinds of things that are not impervious. Highest impact properties would be those that have a lot of asphalt there, and most of them tend to be that they were capped at that 12, 15, 32, which you can see all of them were, and that cap change will increase their cap. The top 5 are going to hit the cap again, so the most they will be charged is 24, 30, 65. So in essence, they're increasing double. An implementation plan. As I thought over this, again, Council McConaughey's request for me to meet with one of the entities that we found out is really a billing error more than it is the change of this calculation method, really made me start thinking about how we want to implement this. We're not asking you to take any action on this at this time. What we're asking is for you to give us your approval to have an effective date of July 1st of 2020. So when we bring the budget to you, it will have a consolidated fee schedule included in there that will outline how we're charging this as well as what the fee is. During the time between now and then, I would like to work closely with our communications officer and provide a communication letter that will say, here's your current fee, here's your new fee. We've done an audit of the system. We have made an error on our behalf. We will not be back charging you for anything, but we will be implementing this fee that's correct on July 1st of 2020. How can we work with you? What do you need from us? How can we help you? This will also need to be some in-person meetings for those that would be maybe in an HOA or in a mobile home park or those kinds of things. We want to reach out to them in person. And then also provide them with a period to apply for a credit for on-site remediation. So those businesses that have put in retention basins or HOAs or areas that have retention basins, et cetera, that should have a credit towards our stormwater fee will have 6 months time to work with our GIS system and engineering department to be able to get that credit application in. And then in the meantime, we do have 2 protests that are current from 2 of our property owners. And we will be meeting with the city attorney on those accounts and how to move forward with those protests in the beginning. We will let them know that everything will change July 1st, but in the meantime, they may not be as patient as we'd like them to be between now and then. So we may be asking for some forgiveness of them ahead of time. We don't really know yet what the response will be. So that's it. We are asking for your concession to this methodology change and for the implementation plan and your comments, please.
Okay, if no one else, I like it.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's really refreshing to see just the direct, yeah, we've made some errors, here's what we're doing to fix it. And I don't think anybody expects perfection, but just the professionalism behind how this is being addressed and handled, it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Couldn't ask for more.
I guess my question would be is that if we implement this in July and we have the people on the right-hand side that, you know, the Boeings of the world that are going to get a substantial increase, is that 6 months enough for them to work on their budgets to get that? to
Yeah.
start to work towards that. I mean, we're talking an extra $1,200 a month, that's, an extra $15,000 a year. I'm wondering how those companies would budget that, and is there another way to transition? That's my question. I don't have any thoughts at the present time, but it's just a question.
It's more about how do we keep this revenue neutral? The Stormwater Fund is in need of those funds. And so by putting it off any further, we're burdening those that should have a decrease for a longer period of time. And it's a net of about 50-50. It really is. It's really close. So I think that's a great question. And I really thought about how long we should give them to notice them. But gratefully, those that have that kind of an impact are larger businesses, which I believe probably can absorb that into their budgets. When we're discussing some of the other changes, they might be more significant.
Quick question on that. What is our reserve position in the Stormwater Fund?
Stormwater Fund is actually in a decent position. However, we have several very large and expensive projects that are in design and getting ready to hit construction. So the reserves in Stormwater are significant at this point, but they will come down pretty quickly within the next budget year.
Okay, I was just thinking theoretically, if the greatest increase users, say anybody over 50%, that are gonna see a greater than 50% increase, we would phase it in 50% in January, 50% in July, 50% in January, or something along those lines, and absorb that, not hold off on giving the break, like you mentioned, to those that need it, absorb that with reserves.
But do 2 steps?
If it's in there. Yeah, if we have reserves enough to cover that, just to be nice, and not hit anybody too fast, too quickly. Just a thought.
Can I jump in if it's work session?
You may jump.
Is anyone, I seem to recall an earlier slide, the largest increase anyone was getting was a third, a 33% increase.
All right, 100%.
Is that
We
right?
have 5 of them that are hitting 100%.
They are, and that's because they're hitting that cap, right? So that ERU limit increase, there's 13 of them. They're actually getting more than a 30% increase because of that cap change. So taking a cap from 215 units to 425 automatically lifted those few businesses.
And this is the same where I had when we had the water rate increase, and I had brought forth the idea of working with the larger water users to have a gradual increase rather than all at once, and kind of just fell on deaf ears. We talked about it, but then it never happened, and then boom, it changed. So that's my worry once again. Here we have businesses that it's going to impact them. It's $1,200 a month. It's a huge increase, and we haven't talked about how we're gonna implement this, but I would like to see a way of implementing this on a maybe 12-month rather than, July 1st, just so that they aren't getting hit all at once.
So the 2 thoughts that I have, having gone through the budget process for quite a few, in my professional life, I work creating financial statements for large corporations. And as you're going through the budgeting process, it might not necessarily make it easier for some of the larger corporations to do it in 2 separate steps. It might cause more headaches than anything else. So I'd want to be cognizant of trying to make it as easy as possible. And one of the things I really liked that Denise said was the letter that's going out says, this is what we're intending. What can we do to help you? Kind of leaving the door open for them to come back and say, whoa, maybe for us, we do need to be able to hear it. And Mike just died? There it is. But the thought being, I'd like to see there be some flexibility, and rather than us mandate, do it on a longer slope or a shorter slope, leave it open, and over the next couple months as information trickles in, perhaps have another report back saying, this is what we've been hearing from folks, and we would recommend a policy of X, Y, or Z, rather than try to guess what that policy should be. I'd rather let it stay with finance and come back with a recommendation. I like leaving the door open just to see what folks might like out there.
So I've got a question and a thought, or maybe 2 questions. If I recall right, didn't this impact affect mobile home park very substantially?
That would have been one of those billing corrections we talked about, yes.
Are we gonna do anything to try to mitigate that at all, since I'm sure that they're not a Fortune 500 company?
Right. They're one of several that are HOA or multifamily components that were not charged correctly that based on their area. And those are ones that I am going to be working with Tani on and that we're going to reach out in person. I've already made a phone call to meet with the mobile home park, and I'll be meeting with them next week. They don't know what I'm coming for, so they're kind of funny about it. They're like, what's the finance director coming to meet with me about? But it's probably never good news when the finance director wants to meet with you. But I will be working with Tani and deciding like which of those really we need to really reach out to. And those of them that will just go, oh gosh, just send me a letter and tell me what needs to happen. This number of accounts is a little unusual for me. Typically, I've done audits on utility systems, and you always find something somewhere, but it's kind of a lot. 90 people to reach out to is a lot for us, but we will do our best to do so, and we'll probably start with a letter, as well as those that are going to have a large impact, we will reach out to in person. The
other question I had is, given the size of increase on some of these businesses, and this may go to the flexibility that was talked about here a minute ago, is there a way for those businesses to change their impervious surfaces that would reduce that cost? And if they went down that road, what would it do to what we're doing?
It's kind of funny you ask that, because we're straddling two different utilities. We're looking at stormwater and we're looking at water. So if they mulch up the dirt surfaces and don't use it for, cars to park on or go over or those kinds of things, so that it's not continuing to get compacted, and they put grass in that might need to be watered, or local scapes. I guess local scapes would work pretty well as well. So local scape is not considered an impervious surface. However, once they compact that area, it automatically does. So water versus stormwater. Stormwater is probably far less for them to pay for than water.
But artificial grass is non-impervious or impervious?
Oh, that I don't know.
I'm aware of at least one method to install it will be impervious, and another when you can install and it is pervious.
Okay.
But the cost to install can vary greatly.
Great, yes, and as we were discussing, I like the tiered approach, because especially for the users who are the small mom and pop businesses, maybe home-based business or fixed income retirees, where that lower level tier helps them manage their budget. I've met with many residents who have said they don't want to be priced out of their homestead that they've been here living in for 30 years. And so I can see wisdom in striving to keep the lower tier lower and then progressing with the additional higher water users. Thank you.
With the water use, thank you.
Just quick clarification though, this wouldn't impact an individual resident, so the seniors or home-based businesses would not be impacted, correct?
Stormwater will not be impacted by the water rates whatsoever.
Correct, just wanting to mention that since it's
Appreciate that.
in all of your study. Thank you.
But this can affect certain homes because of the HOA.
It will, absolutely. If they're in an HOA area that was not charged correctly, that absolutely is the case.
And there are HOAs that are not on commercial water meters, not that we're talking about water per se. So how does that, because there are HOAs.
So HOA for stormwater tends to be for their common area. And, or if they have streets that are private, so private lanes, right? So that tends to be that mobile home park. That's why it's actually a fee higher than if we had said each mobile home pad is a single-family residence, because we could say that, right? I mean, it's kind of, it's got lines of delineation. And when you multiply out 210 times 558, the fee's actually slightly, it's like less than 5%, but it's slightly less than what their fee will be. But because they have all of that impervious surface where they own all of the roads that is considered impacted in the storm drain, their fee is actually a little higher than if all of them individually were charged $558. An HOA would be very similar. If we were to take an HOA that owns all their private lanes and just charge $558 per residence and not charge for the private lanes.
Right, I'm just thinking over the last probably 5 to 7 years, there was a time when there was a real shift away from neighborhood parks and making them HOA-funded parks. And otherwise, for the most part, the neighborhood resembles any other neighborhood, but there is an HOA kind of overlaying that for that neighborhood amenity, whatever that neighborhood amenity is. It could be a swimming pool, it could be a park, it could be a whatever, rodeo ground, I don't know, no, not a rodeo.
A zoo.
A zoo, could be whatever. So, but because there's an amenity, they made an HOA so for a funding mechanism only, really, to pay for that amenity. But their homes are homes, single-family homes, and it's just it's a home. So I'm wondering kind of how that overlays, because I live in an HOA that's kind of a hybrid of that, where we do have private lanes, but we also have single-family homes. So I'm not quite.
So some HOAs are individually charged per unit, and I haven't looked at yours particularly, but some HOAs do have a single-family calculation for each of the homes, and then another calculation for lanes or
whatever the
clubhouse or
common
those
area
kinds of
is.
things, common areas, right? Yeah. And others, because of, there's no delineation between them, then others are based on their total area. It's similar to water. Water's the same way. Some of the HOAs have individual water meters. Others chose to put in one big meter, and
Yeah, that's mine, yeah.
Any other questions? Is the majority of the council in favor of implementation of July 1st with the caveat that we will listen to those as they respond, as we communicate over the next few months?
I would like to add to that though, and please weigh in if you guys don't like this, that as those meetings happen and that communication is received back by whoever's meeting with them, you and Tawny and whoever else, that get passed on to the council too, so that we have a good idea of, as those conversations happen, if there needs to be tweaking along the way, we're aware of that as well.
Great. We will give you status reports regularly over the next few months.
Well, and I'm wondering at some point in time if we just shouldn't have a noticed meeting and those people can also come in and express their concerns or whatever to us as well.
Festivus airing of grievances.
Yes.
I think the biggest problem is going to be we do not have any solid legal ground to stand on without implementing this calculation method. It'd be difficult for us to say that we could change anything other than increase the rate and change the impervious surface application. Like the 3,000 could go to 4,000, but that would mean that we need to increase the $558 per ERU for everybody, including the residences, by 25%, right? Because we've reduced that impervious surface calculation down, we would need to increase the rate to everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving on to workshop, item number B, discussion regarding strategic planning meeting, Friday, January 24th, 2020. David, we'll have you kind of lead us in this one.
All right, thank you. I am going to initially thank the mayor's staff for assisting with collecting some data and information. Tawny specifically helped track down sort of agendas from 5 different jurisdictions across the United States. One of those jurisdictions started with a wonderful quote from Yogi Berra. "The future ain't what it used to be." As such, you guys can decide what that future looks like, and it's not what it has been. So I will indicate that at your seat was a handout of a workshop agenda that was put together previously. What I will share with you is that the other 5 jurisdictions that I've reviewed, they talk about getting together and looking at goals citywide, and then hitting on those goals for budget purposes so that the budget then moves towards accomplishing those goals, and having literally, in the instance of one city, the ability to hand out to the public a single sheet of paper about what the city's goals are. In that relation, this, I think, can fairly be shared with you as a working template. And if you want to get back to me on what that looks like, if you want to share with your fellow council members what it shouldn't be or what it should be, we'll set it up. But it's really my understanding that you all wanted to drive this council retreat. In the past, it has been driven by the city manager's presentations, charrettes that included what each department's needs were, so you could have an idea as you went into the budget year why they were going to be asking for whatever it is that they sought. It's my understanding, having talked to most of you at this point, you should tell me what it is you want that agenda to look like. If this is a starting point, shoot it back to me and I'll keep firing it back and forth, and I'll be mindful of Rob Wall's presentation.
And to be fair, this is the second iteration of the agenda. We had a pretty mild agenda to start with, and then I passed this on to Councilmember Chris McConaughey, and I did put some things in. So this is not set in stone. This is just to get us started. My thought process with the strategic planning, and Councilmember Whitelock, I think we've said this for 2 years in a row. Did we really do any strategic planning in those meetings? No. So that's what I want this meeting to be, and I think that means that first half of the day before lunch should be council-driven. City council decisions, city council discussions, city council goals. I don't see a lot of goal setting in this first this first agenda we put together, so I want to look at this again and take some more changes. The second half of the meeting was to kind of do a bridge and have both Mayor Burton with us and also some of the staff to talk about things that we need to talk about for 2020 and beyond. Budget is important. Water is obviously important. We still haven't figured that one out. And then an hour or so with public safety to talk with our chief of police and also our fire chief to see what help needs to be done there, or what we can help as a city council. So those are my thoughts as we put this together. I'd like to hear from the rest of you. If not, we can all go home tonight and look at this and then make some comments either by email if we're allowed to. Rob, just don't text me.
Rob's not gonna care if he has to show up at the meeting, are you? My thought is, I think I agree with you, Councilmember Lamb, is that we're not gonna know where we're going if we don't have an idea of what the roadmap looks like to get there. I mean, you know, unless you got a freeway that's already been designed, and I don't think we do. I think that we do have to set some goals and maybe even some benchmarks during the year to know if we're on target to, I mean, we're changing government, we've got plans. I think we need to be more proactive, and doing those will, I agree with you. I think the morning needs to be, what do we see as, I mean, we've got 45 minutes for us to share our thoughts and our priorities, but we need to consolidate those and agree with that's the direction we want to go, and make sure that we get where we need to be, and some of the ways that we get there. So I agree with some of the things that you said, Mr. Bricky, and I think that's the only way we change from being a lot of reactive to proactive, is decide what our goals are and where we need to be come July 1st, and where we need to be next January, and some places in between. So I would agree with that the morning probably ought to be blocked off more with just goal setting, direction philosophies and hammer that out in a good discussion on where we need to be, that we can share that with the citizens before we even get to budgets. But those priorities will help drive the budgets as well, and to make sure that we're doing what we need to do with the budget.
So do you all agree we start at 7:30, have the juice and something to incentivize you to get here that early? I know I'm the only coffee drinker, but I'll have my cup. Oh, nope, there's a second. But if we can start at 7:30, get down to work at 8, and set a period of time for goal setting from 8 a.m., that, I think, would accomplish that roundtable discussion that was identified on the agenda that was handed out. It was important and shared with me that each one of you get an opportunity to talk for 5, 6, 7 minutes uninterrupted about what it is you think the city's goals should be. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. Then it transfers into probably how to make that budget process tie to each goal. I'm getting at least an inquisitive look from one member of the council. I'm just trying to facilitate direction, so jump in
I
here.
just have a question. We just elected a chair and a vice chair to set our agenda, so how long are we gonna spend on putting this agenda together?
Tonight, if you want to defer to them, I'll work with them.
Three motions to make a,
Well, I'm just curious, because I thought that's what we elected them for, so. I mean,
this is our
I
agenda.
say, right, it is, but I say they put it together and send it out to us, and then we give them our input. I mean, I don't know what we're accomplishing, I guess.
I guess I would just like to chime in and mention, I think up to 5 minutes is fine for us to share our thoughts, but then to have only 45 minutes from 10:15 to 11 to discuss that, wow, that could be a whole day, discussing each of our priorities, pros and cons. That I don't think we could do that in 45 minutes, but at least if we could have some time to drill down into specifics, we could understand each other, and then we could build on that in the future. I just think 45 minutes wouldn't be near enough time to flesh things out.
that's very similar to what I was gonna say. I very much like the order of topics here, the general direction that this presents. I'm in favor of, but I think the specific timelines on here may or may not be quite in the right priority sense. In other words, again, like Councilmember Pack just said, I almost say Commissioner Pack. Wow, flashback. Councilmember Pack just said, the 45 minutes to everybody kind of lay your cards on the table is good, but 45 minutes to discuss and prioritize where those cards should be and come to a consensus is not enough. Again, 30 minutes for the budget process and overview, I think is probably not enough. Sorry, Denise, she's still here. She's not here.
I think that's, the budget discussion isn't to spend hours discussing budget, it's just to get a top line overview.
Yeah, but again, I think.
Yeah, we could have
I think,
a 5-hour
for
budget
example,
discussion.
overview of the budget timeline, we're all gonna have some input on that. And that's gonna take half an hour.
And that's why we're talking tonight,
Right, so that's, yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is that I think the topics covered here are probably pretty good. But the exact timeframes laid out on the side probably need some, if not tweaking up front, at least some fluidity allowed, so that we can, if legal obligations of the city council, I know he's an attorney, and he likes to talk, but, as attorneys do. If we make that a 15-minute or a 20-minute conversation, that gives us 15 to 20 minutes more to allocate somewhere else. Or, yeah, moving council priority projects up to right after the council roundtable might be a good idea as well. Anyway, just allowing some fluidity to this, I think, as the day goes by. Not to allow it to be willy-nilly, but just to allow it to be somewhat bendy.
Well, and in keeping with Councilmember Whitelock's suggestion, if you want to chime in, as I've just heard from at least 2 council members say, I don't like that, I will then get an agenda draft put together tomorrow, and then perhaps I can plan on calling each of you on Friday, talk a little more about what it is that it's beginning to look like, so that when it's finally sent out next week, I'd like to have it out fairly soon, next week being a goal, so it's in advance of that date. So on the 22nd, you'll know what you're going to tell the public you're going to accomplish on the 24th.
And some of these items that are on here have been items that have, they're not so much strategic, they're more tactical, and items that have come up in conversations with the group, like city council administration, trying to figure out what do we imagine the city council is going to look like, how do we imagine staffing is going to change with time, infrastructure, like updates to this room. That's not really a goal per se, or it could be a goal. Should we scrap that and open it up and just kind of have a generic goal setting and just have a nice large window for that? And I mean, same thing with council priority projects. This was taking the idea of each of us are going to come in with different things that we want to accomplish, and these are the themes that we've been seeing. So that first half of the meeting, kind of chunk it up into the themes that probably need to be addressed most quickly right out of the chutes. But we can easily just say, those three all get lumped together and just say goals and benchmarks, and leave it open, leave it fluid. The problem with that is if we do need support from staff or something, we may have to come back and do that at a later point in time. But would the preference be for that first purchase, leave that chunk from like 9:30 to noon, just the basic open?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would actually move the legal obligations ahead of the roundtable part as well, just because that may help shape that conversation.
Okay.
Knowing what those legal obligations are and the framework that we should be working under.
Plus we can eat while Rob's talking.
Even
So I think, Chris, at this point, just with the stuff we've gathered and you as chair, you can take this information now, kind of revise what you need to, get with Bricky, and then send this back to us again for another round of discussion.
Well, the first,
He also needs to get with Kelvin. That's how the code is written.
the first request that went out for feedback though on the agenda, was anything provided back?
With the what?
There was an initial request, I believe, that had been sent out for feedback as items that would like to be discussed.
I have not seen any.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Okay. If we have no other discussion on the planning meeting for Friday, we'll move to workshop 9C. Discussion regarding future city council work sessions, Kayleen Whitelock and Melissa Worthen. Is it Kayleen or Melissa? Who wants to take this one? Okay.
I've talked to all of you actually regarding this, had many people that have come to me since I've been elected, that have expressed the need for workshops and the availability of council to be able to get in front of us and speak to us. From what I've been told, and I have no reason not to agree with this because I've done a little of my own research, we are the only city that does not have regularly scheduled workshops. So I definitely agree. I don't want to have a meeting just to have a meeting, just to have something scheduled and stare at each other. I mean, don't need that. But I do think that we need to have something, if it's not just at least once a month, especially with a new person coming in to work with us, that if somebody calls and wants to meet with us, they've got to have at least one day a month that they can say, okay, council is available on the third Tuesday of every month, that I can fill somebody in if they call. Working in an administrative position myself in the past, where I was setting schedules for multiple people, if somebody called in, I'd have to have an idea of at least one meeting time where people could be scheduled. With the fact that we're gonna have an assistant, or it's not director, that's gonna be working under us, that is gonna have to schedule for us, I would like to come up with at least one day a month that we can say, we will all be available if this person needs to schedule something for us to sit down with someone in a workshop. Just so they don't have, because logistically, that's gonna be a nightmare for them. Somebody calls in and says, I'd like to meet with council regarding this property, regarding this, whatever it is. And they go, okay, let me call all 7, figure out which day and time is gonna work best, and then I'll get back to you. That's just gonna be very difficult for that person. So what I'd like to do is see if we could come up with just one day a month where we say, we're available if needed. If we're not needed, we're not needed. But that at least gives our director something to be able to put us on a calendar when somebody calls in at their request.
So your thoughts are the workshop is more not for us, but for others to set time and agendas with us?
I'm thinking more of the person that we're gonna hire, that as someone's reaching out to them, saying that I would like to set a workshop with, get in front of city council, discuss this with city council before it gets put on the agenda, or it's gonna be coming up in the agenda, and I'd like to give them this information, that our director does not have to contact all 7 of us and try to figure out a time that works for us. They already have a day and time on the calendar that they can say, yeah, perfect. Every third Tuesday from 6 to 8, council is open to meet with someone that needs to be met with. And if nobody calls to set up that time, then we just don't meet, and we just don't have that work session. But it gives that person that we're bringing on that availability to do that.
And that could equally apply to meetings that we decide we need to have to talk about, playground equipment or whatever, so just a thought.
Last night, I heard from more than one applicant that they talked like we had workshops, because most cities do. And I know that, at least in the group that I was in, I know Chris wasn't available, but at least 2 of them brought those up and thought we had them. So it's needed to do the work. If we want to really work for the city, we need to put in the work.
So I'm gonna jump in here. I agree that we need to have whatever we call them, work sessions, other meetings. We need to have stuff where this is a terrible forum
Exactly.
to work out anything. I have to send up smoke signals to even see Chris.
Well, my back's to him most of the time, so I'm like,
But, so I agree, we need those, because we need to get in depth on some of these things, and I think it will help move meetings along. I know that there are a couple of council members that have scheduling, so at least initially to start, I think that one night a month, at least for the next couple of months, until we can figure out what we really want to do, might at least give us the framework that if somebody calls, we can meet. And I don't know if it's one night a month. We need to. I don't know how to do that, but I would like to see something the first couple of months, and then as we move on and we get more formalized with the council director and a couple other people, that we can really get into the nitty-gritty of council operations and how that's going to work, whether we use work sessions, committee meetings with smaller groups, those kinds of things. We can work through those nuts and bolts in that kind of a session so that we can figure out what we're doing. I think right now, we're the blind leading the blind, and it's tough. So I do agree, we need to start with those, and at some point in time, we need to transition to the point where we really know what the operations are doing.
I just wanted to share a couple of ideas, because I'm certainly not opposed to work sessions. I definitely want to allocate sufficient time to do the job well that we've been elected to do. I just want it to be efficient as well and manageable. So I'm wondering also if some of the issue isn't effective communication, and if some of these items might also be addressed intrinsically with the change of the form of government. And all I'm doing is offering my perspective just from my personal experience from the last decade of being on committees other than city council, where the applicants are meeting with the full-time city staff who are hired for 40 hours or more a week to vet a lot of these issues, and city council has given those full-time staff members direction as to what we're looking for. Now, granted, we're a new city council, so I agree we should meet. But I'm wondering, when people want to get in front of city council members, if we might open the door too much for that, because I don't want to micromanage. I think that we should focus on only what we can focus on and let city staff handle what they're supposed to be focusing on. So that's just my thought, that I like the process where the applicants meet with the city staff, they work through everything, then in a meeting, the applicants present, then the city staff presents, then we discuss it, we deliberate, and we vote on it. Certainly, we do need some other meetings in addition to that, especially in advance of the budget, in advance of setting the budget or the legislative session. But I just want to make sure we're not impacting staff, staying too many nights as well.
But staff are many of them that would like us to be available for them.
Yes.
And
So-
this is different than planning commission.
All I'm trying to do
This
is share my
so-
opinion.
I know, and I'm just
Is
letting
that
you know that
I want
that
to
it is
ensure that we
staff
have
as well.
as many meetings as we need, but not to have meetings just to have a meeting.
Well, and I think part of that is, what I'm getting back to is with the director is, it's unfair for us to ask that person to do this job and then they get a staff member, a developer, a citizen group that calls and says, I need to talk with city council about X, when would that be appropriate? I don't know. I mean, you're literally giving this person
Right.
no direction to how they can handle those types of requests.
And all I'm wondering is if that X topic is something that city council should be addressing. I'm grateful that we have workshops set up and with jointly with the planning commission. Yeah, that's
That would
basically.
be the direction we would give that person.
Right.
And, and they can reach out to us and say, okay, this person wants it, and then we can always go back and say, that really isn't an appropriate thing for us to be doing.
Well, and that's
You know,
why
but
people
just
generally want to
having an
meet with
open
us, is
time.
because it's outside the scope of what the city code usually already is.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think that what we do too often is that, and we saw this with a couple of meetings that I watched this, some of you struggle with this, is that we get something on the agenda and it immediately comes in with a staff report and a recommendation from the planning commission, and it's a short fuse project or something, and we don't get a look at it in depth. And I have to tell you.
Well, to be fair, we didn't get those in time anyway
Well, you
for
didn't.
a workshop.
No, you didn't. But I think that, and you're absolutely right, I agree with that 100%. But I think as we start to, my philosophy is that I've done this with other state organizations for a few years, is that whenever you have a process that is a transparent, replicable, and you do the same thing the same way every time, you're gonna get a good product. And I have to tell you that there are lots of times, and I saw it on planning commission, we're not doing a conditional use permit just to mitigate the potential issues. We're talking about Daybreak with a master development agreement that's gonna be 5 binders big. Well, we're gonna have to spend more than 10 minutes to approve the master development agreement, and, because we've gotta go through that, and we've gotta feel good about that. And so I think there's lots of times that when we're looking at changing ordinances, we need to be able to talk about what's the impact, what's the second and third order effect. And in a formal setting like this, I'm not sure that I buy, because we can't sit across the table eye to eye, that we really can get down to asking questions and resolving those kind of things.
Well, here's what I'll throw out without a vote. We have a work session next Wednesday, which a couple days ago, they said we weren't gonna have it, now we are. We have our council retreat on the 24th. We have another city council meeting on the 22nd. So January, we're full.
Oh, absolutely.
And the
When-
combined planning commission meeting.
Yes,
on the 29th.
exactly. My Wednesdays, I can't be here every Wednesday, and I'm gonna throw that out there right now. So the city council Wednesdays, I am committed to, I will be here for each of those. If you want a workshop, it can't be on the other Wednesdays. Now, I know Chris has some obligations on Tuesdays. So I'm gonna throw this out there, this is just me saying this, we're not gonna vote. How about we look at the last Thursday of February to plan a work session? Because there's at least 3 on here on our council that wanna do this, and let's see how it goes. That's just what I'm throwing out.
I mean, part of the feedback that I heard on this, just, it was, and this is an email that Mr. Bricky sent to us with a schedule of some things that were coming up, and you're right, I mean, we've got the 15th, the 22nd, the 24th, the 29th, and I heard many comments, well, I mean, well, that's just a lot, and I can't do this, and I can't do, if we pre-plan it and say, this is when we agree to be available, then we don't have to worry about, oh, surprise,
That's
this is
right.
gonna be on your
That's what I'm
schedule,
throwing-
so yeah, I
let's-
absolutely agree
Let's
with
give it
what
an
you're
opportunity
saying.
in February, and
Yeah.
I'm just saying, not tonight, maybe we talk about it in our session, that's the last Thursday of February, and Zach, you brought up a good point, what are we gonna talk about? I don't know, but there seems to be a consensus here that people wanna have a work session. I'm willing to do it if I can be there, and I'm willing to see if it works, but right now, at this point, I don't know what work session we need in February.
So I'll throw out a couple thoughts. I'd like us to see, I'd like to see us put a work session on there for February, probably to go more in depth with what's being proposed out at Woods Ranch. I'd like to see one probably in April for the same, to talk about progress, because as Mr. Wall pointed out, this is something new, something the legislature just approved, and has not been tried or tested. So February, maybe combine that in April with a workshop for the budget at the same time. We know the budget's gonna come up, let's just get something on the calendar for April to talk about budget. Probably a second one to talk about the budget in May. I don't know
We
if
can talk about all this in our council retreat, right? About what days and stuff like that.
Yeah, the days we can talk about that during council retreat. I'm just saying the idea that we have these things that we know that are coming up, rather than put just like a generic day out there and say, hey, council's available to meet. I worry about who it is that's going to be wanting to come in, because I don't want to sit there for and open the door for every developer who's looking for a change to their zoning, and they see this as an opportunity to come to us without having to pay to go through the planning commission, but just kind of test the waters with council. Outside of that, I don't know who we're not hearing from. I guess to me, the problem hasn't been clearly articulated as to why we need to meet more frequently. The problem that I do see is many of our meetings go rather long. A lot of information is being presented to us for the first time in that meeting. And I think some of that can be largely mitigated through agenda management and inside of the councils to what's coming down the pipe. And we can say, no, this needs to come up sooner. We don't want to discuss that on the day that a decision has to be rendered. Additionally, I've heard concerns about this format for the workshop, and I think we could potentially change up the meeting time a little bit in the format so that we have the formal decision-making here on the dais, and then adjust, and whether it's another room or another setup, we can make changes. But I don't necessarily think we have to have a separate meeting on a whole nother day. Depending on how much time is needed, I think we might be able to look at doing both types of meetings on the same day, kind of like Planning Commission does their pre-meeting. Well, I don't like the idea of a pre-meeting, but having two different settings that better collaborate or better foster collaboration. I just worry that the fixation is the panacea is more meetings. And I worry that, kind of like we've been told repeatedly with roads, as soon as you open the roads up, people will come. Well, pretty soon are we going to be meeting every single week because we said we would? Are we actually being more efficient, or are we just meeting more? The other thing that I'm a little bit leery of jumping into and saying, let's just do this in perpetuity from now, is with this new form of government, I'm curious to see how things change and how the types of issues that we're seeing will change. Before we were both quasi-administrative and legislative, and now where there's more that's falling on the office of the mayor. Plus, a lot of the stuff that we saw last year was to help with the change in form of government. So I anticipate this year is going to be very different, anticipate with the council having more insight into what's coming on the agendas and being able to push back and say, no, we need this sooner, or, you know what, this isn't quite ready, I think we're gonna see some significant changes anyway, so I'd be a little bit hesitant to do anything terribly drastic. But, like I said, we do have issues that we know are coming, so let's get some workshops on the calendar for whatever we need to discuss what's happening on the west side of the city. Let's get the budget stuff up on there. We're probably gonna wanna have one about water rates, specifically for water rates somewhere in the mix. We'll want to have something for the legislators, to meet with them well in advance of the session. I can think of probably 7 or 8 separate meetings that we do want. So I would suggest we start with those. I don't want to see us add 1 meeting a month, add 12 months for that, plus another 7 for these things that we know we need. I'd rather just start with what we know we need and kind of reevaluate as we're going.
So I guess my point was not the ones that we know about, but the ones we don't know about, and showing that we're available. Saying that, yes, we're available, we're willing, and this is the day of the month where we're there. If, I don't know, Corbin has something that, needs to be taken care of in a workshop, he knows that the last Thursday of every month, he can put something in there. And if he knows it's coming up, then, he can put it, there's that space for we're available. Every other city has that time. We don't.
But every other city also, that workshop is an agendized, open meeting with specific agenda items. It's not there just because a developer wants to meet. Now, that may be, there are other vehicles for that. The open the meetings in all the other cities are more of an informal meeting to hammer out the specifics of wording on an ordinance or doing those kind of things. And I do like one of the suggestions that Councilmember McConaughey is that those works, Salt Lake City's works, and I'm not advocating this one. Salt Lake City starts their work sessions at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and go from 2 until 5, and they have the formal meeting at night. I'm not advocating that, but I am willing to look at the workshops and what we're talking about tonight. This is a workshop. We're hammering out the stuff that we think is important. We just need to have, just like all the other cities do, they put it on it, they have an agenda, and if the mayor's office wants to put something on an agenda, then that goes to the council director, and we decide when it goes on the agenda. And if it's something in depth that needs to be a workshop, then I think we can start to look at those. I like the idea of setting aside a day so that we can target some things, but can we do it on the same night that we're doing council? We're just not going until midnight every night because of meeting management. I'm okay with that one too.
When you ask what's the purpose is to have more dialogue. We don't have good dialogue as a council. We just don't. We don't have good dialogue when we're up here. It just is not. And then it's, in my opinion, it's not fair to staff. They prepare a ton of stuff for us. They bring it before us. And we haven't given them any input, so they do their best. They give it to us and we say, no, change that period, change that comma. No, we don't like that amount. We don't want that. We don't want that. Good luck, come back. And I don't think that's fair to staff personally. And that's what I think workshops accomplish, is they accomplish a smoother process where we can give head nods and direction and that they can have an idea of what we really want. In addition to that, you're right, this last year we went through code. And we kept being told, please stick to just change in form of government. But I know I'm not the only one sitting up here that saw that there was a lot in code that we should probably be reviewing and changing. And that will take time, as we saw. And we need to do that. Our council rules 2 years ago probably 4 years ago, they should have been changed. They're still not up to date and changed. Those need to be changed. That needs a workshop. And for me, I'm good either way. Whatever you want to do is fine. But every one of us has a job outside of here. Every one of us has other obligations. And to me, quite frankly, if we can't schedule something in advance, it's not probably going to be my priority because it doesn't seem to be the body's priority. And I just can't miss another family thing because all of a sudden you've decided we do need a workshop and it should be this day, when right now we could already kind of decide and put a motion on an agenda and just make something so we all know that that's the date it will occur and we can pencil it in. And then if we have it, we have it and it's scheduled. For me, I know they're valuable. I've seen how they help. I'm sad that I can't convey to you why it's important.
Thank you.
And with that, why don't we end this part of the workshop, because I don't know if we're gonna get any further with what we're talking about, and we can discuss more during our council strategic session. So I'm gonna go ahead and end workshop 9C. And at this point, I'm gonna make a motion to move to closed session for the discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. B, strategy session to discuss pending reasonable intimate litigation, which I'm not sure if we do that anymore, but we'll talk about that. And C, strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, including any form of water rights or water shares, and adjourn from there.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion on the motion? Let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Sure.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Pro Tem Mayor Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthen.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.